A calm night opens like a curtain, and space hums with a sound too soft for ears. Between bright pins of starlight, something drifts in from the dark. It is thin, long, and quiet, an ancient traveler slipping through a whisper of stars. No tail, no glowing coma, no grand announcement. Only a faint mark that crosses the sky like a brushstroke. Telescopes turn. Sensors wake. The object moves in a path not like the others. Near the sun, most wanderers bow and curve as gravity draws them in. But this one arrives fast, cuts across the plane of planets, and keeps on going. Its orbit is strange. Its turn is quieter than breath. The trajectory bends like a secret. They give it a name from a distant language. Oumuamua, the scout, the messenger. Observatories across oceans compare notes. A drifting shadow crosses starlight. Star fields dim, then brighten by the smallest degree. The signals look like a heartbeat under a gentle veil. What does a telescope do? It gathers old light and makes it young again. A spectrograph breaks that light apart like a prism splits rain. The line should tell a simple story: rock, ice, dust. But the lines are quiet. No clear water signature, no haze of carbon. The readout is a whisper. The solar wind nudges the traveler as it slides past the sun. A push you cannot see adds to the motion you can plot. The numbers shift. The track on the screen makes a steady bow that physics almost explains, but not quite. It is like a leaf on a slow river, pulled by two currents at once. Gravity here. Something else there. Astronomers note the anomaly. They've seen comets do tricks like this. Jets of gas acting like tiny engines. But there is no tail, no flare, no dust haze to blame. They run models through the computers. Comet, asteroid, shard, pancake, cigar, snowball, dust raft. The shapes change, the math adjusts, but the curve keeps the same quiet tilt, like a head turning to listen. You too are invited to listen. If you're hearing this as you drift towards sleep, that's why these stories exist. Subscribe and share where you are and what time it is. I read them. New York at midnight, London before dawn, Sydney at noon, like stars across the earth. A map of watchers under one sky. The traveler does not glow, so it is found by what it hides. Each time it crosses a star, the light dips, then returns. The dip is small but real, like a breath taken and released. That pattern becomes the pulse the team follows. They watch the intervals stretch as it speeds away. Time between dips is a ruler laid across the night. In the data, someone notices a forbidden pattern, not because it is loud, but because it is too neat. Nature loves mess. Dust sheds in uneven bursts. Ice cracks when it feels like it. But here, the light curve sometimes falls in steps that echo a rhythm. It is not proof, only the hint of a song. An encrypted message would hide in such things, inside timing, inside silence, inside the space between flickers. They test with care. A spectrograph cannot translate a code, but it can tell when the music of light plays off-key. They compare the steps to known causes: rotation, tumbling, a long flat object flipping end over end. That explains many moments, but not all. Some steps fall too cleanly, like fence posts in a fog. If there is a sender, it loves restraint. A narrator reads the logs. Non-gravitational acceleration observed. No detectable outgassing. Trajectory deviates from pure Keplerian orbit. Simple words that carry weight. Outside, the night is still. Starlight spills across ridges and into the empty lot where a lone moth circles a lamp. Some watchers step out to feel the cold and to look up. The traveler has passed the sun and is on the way out, moving toward the edge of the family of planets. It will not come back. Its path is hyperbolic, a word for goodbye that keeps on going. Astronomers speak of eccentricity greater than 1, and excess velocity. What they mean is, this messenger does not belong here. It came from another star and will return to the deep dark between stars. Consider how long it has traveled. Count years not in dozens, but in hundreds, maybe thousands. The rock, or not rock, has been sanded by radiation, browned by cosmic rays, sculpted by dust like slow rain. It carries the memory of other suns on its skin. Discovery often begins with a mistake that is really a gift. With Oumuamua, the mistake is absence. The usual signs of a comet are missing, and that emptiness becomes a path to wonder. They build a better orbit from the growing stack of measurements. Each new data point is a stitch. The trajectory tightens. The uncertainty shrinks. Still, the bend remains. It almost behaves like a sail feeling a breeze, but no sail is seen. Maybe its surface reflects light in a way that fools the sensors. Maybe tiny dust streams, invisible in this light, push it forward. The models keep a gentle doubt in their pockets. You might ask, if the turn wasn't physics, who or was the messenger? The team lets the question sit like a small candle. Wonder is fuel, but it must be held with steady hands. Science saves its strongest words for when the evidence insists. Morning arrives. Screens soften from blue to gray. The traveler grows faint, and the dips in light are farther apart, as if the pulse were slowing. Radar cannot reach it now. The distance is too great. All that remains is the watch of photometry and the hush of models humming in their loops. Inside that quiet, another whisper, a message hidden in timing. If the intervals hold a code, it is one written in patience. Maybe primes. Maybe a simple count 1, 2, 3 across the low hum of space. Or maybe it is nothing at all, only the mind tracing music on the surface of noise. By noon, the observatories pass their results like notes, Hawaii to Europe. To the mainland, the hills where a single telescope stands like a lighthouse. They compare and ask for raw files. The forbidden's pattern fades, reappears, fades again. Past and future meet here. In the past, sailors watched for a bird to tell them land was near. In the future, other watches will scan for visitors that do not simply pass through, but pause. A messenger that pauses becomes a neighbor. For now, the traveler stays a guest who keeps walking. The sun lowers. Shadows grow long and cold. The object is smaller each hour, less sure in the readings, as if it were walking backward into mist. Someone refills a cup and forgets to drink it. Someone else sketches a long shape, then erases it and writes, unknown. And yet the night is not empty. The data, quiet as it is, has given a gift. Better questions. If nature wrote this pattern, we will learn what pen it used. If a messenger wrote it, we will listen as long as it takes. As calm returns, the ancient traveler slips farther into the dark. The domes stay ready, patient, faithful to their work. In the cradle of silence, starlight makes thin silver lines like rivers on a map. Somewhere beyond that map, the traveler continues on a line of its own, a quiet thread across a vast cloth. Close your eyes. Feel the soft glow it leaves behind, like a hand moved through water. The pattern may be nothing. It may be everything. Either way, the question remains gentle and steady, like a lighthouse in fog. What turned the scout? In the drifting quiet, the universe seems to lean closer, as if about to share a secret. The silence deepens, and in the deepening, something waits to be understood. The night begins like many others. A soft glow over the domes, a hush in the halls, the air cool and steady as breath. In the data room, monitors hum at a gentle volume, like crickets along a summer creek. Charts drift by on their screens, clean lines, quiet colors. Hands rest over keyboards, waiting. Starlight pours in through distant glass. And somewhere in the stream of numbers, a faint echo appears. A small change, a cadence off by a hair. At first, it is only a feeling. the kind that makes someone lean a little closer, squint, and bring a cup of tea to the desk without tasting it. The instrument logs do not shout. They whisper. Perihelion is past, the point of closest approach to the sun marked and archived. By rules and habit, the object should curl out on its long path like so many ancient travelers do. But the drift continues. There is a push, slight and strange. It does not fit the model. It nudges the object as if by a breath from nowhere. Researchers replay the telescope logs. They love routine. Repetition is comfort in their world, a blanket against noise and error. They scroll back through the last night, then the night before, then last week. Meteor tracks cut across the frames like scratches of light. Satellites thread by with regular timing. But the object of interest keeps a silver path, thin and stubborn. Plot points fall not quite where they should. Each one is a tiny bead on a string that curves wrong by a few pixels. A spectrograph line looks clean, no obvious tail of gas, no dust plume curling off into a faint veil. This is not a comet in the usual sense. If it is, it hides its breath well. Someone pulls a chair closer. Another dims the room so the screens feel like pawns. The cursor moves over a sequence. Click, pause, click. The sound is gentle, like a ticking watch. In the stillness, you can hear the air system, the glossy sound of it turning over. Outside, wind slips around the dome and back into the night. The camera, cold and patient, takes another picture of a sky that has looked the same for millions of years to those who glance too quickly. But the team is not looking quickly. They are looking with care. Perihelion past, drift still building. That sentence lands on a whiteboard. A marker squeaks. Arrows form. Someone writes, non-gravitational acceleration, with a question mark that is taller than the word itself. If the object were shedding gas, it might behave like this. Outgassing can push, the way a small hose can move a leaf on water. But the spectrograph disagrees. No signature hides in the bands. The reflectance curve is plain, almost boring, and still the track shifts that tiny fraction. The narrator, calm, steady, would tell you that science often finds its way through boredom. Long lines of nothing much happen, and then a tremor, a breath, a turn. He would tell you to picture the solar system as a raft of dark velvet, the planets as pearls pinned to it by invisible threads. An orbit is a promise kept, again and again. A rule that holds even in sleep. When a promise bends, even a little, ears open. Logs are compared. Disks spin. The team builds a quick model and then a slow one, because the slow one is faithful and the quick one is daring. Meteor tracks are cross-checked. The timing of a known meteor shower is verified to make sure it has not confused the view. They trace the object's trajectory like a silver thread through a loom, over and under, across patches of stars they've loved since they were children. The thread refuses the neat weave. It rides a quiet bias, a glide just off true. Awe and worry mingle in the room. It is a fragile mix, like frost on glass. They know that anomalies are often the first step to learning. They also know that anomalies often disappear in the light of morning. Bad calibration. A stuck pixel. A correction left on when it should be off. The soft click of keys fills the space while checklists come alive. Bias, frame subtraction, dark current, flat fields, timestamps. Someone laughs quietly at a typo and erases it. Someone else rubs sleepy eyes. The hum of the extender unit settles. Charts refresh with a slow sweep. The object remains just a whisper out of place. The telescope's guidance logs roll through, minute by minute. Tiny adjustments are recorded, the nudges that keep the instrument facing the same patch of sky. None are unusual. The gyro and star tracker agree like old friends finishing each other's sentences. In the corner, a printout curls as it warms, a map of dots marked with little ink circles. On the wall, pinned notes, exoplanet candidates in another field, nebula studies scheduled for the weekend, a calibration star to revisit look on like quiet neighbors. The soothing voice invites the listener to breathe slowly, to feel the chair beneath them, the weight of gravity holding them in place while the machine seeks patterns in the night. If you are listening while sleep draws near, let the lines and points drift like snowflakes. In their slow fall, the story takes shape. The push is small, but it is steady, and steady things add up. They ask the old questions. If there is no cometary tail, what is the engine? If there is no obvious outgassing, what is the pressure? Sunlight itself can push, radiation pressure like a hand on the back, but the numbers look wrong for that too. The body is not broad and flat like a sail, at least not from the light curve seen so far. The curve is calm. No sharp dips, no fast turns. This is not a tumbling shard, or if it is, it tumbles in a way that hides its secrets. One researcher, who loves meteor showers, overlays predicted meteor paths against the object's path. Meteors are the busy bees of the sky, darting and dissolving. Their expected trails do not line up with the anomaly. Another researcher pulls nights from another observatory, 1,000 miles away, where the atmosphere breathes a little differently, and stacks the frames. The silver thread remains. It is as if an unseen finger presses gently, guiding a toy boat through a still pond. No ripples, no wake, only motion, quiet and precise. So the team widens the circle. They look for soft clues. Is the color of the reflected light different than expected? Are there variations in brightness too smooth to catch with a quick glance? They kneel by the data as one might kneel by a fire, staring into ember and ash for shapes. They find none. Or rather, they find shapes that can be read two ways. The object's glow is plain, a steady pebble of sunlight in the dark. If it carries a haze, the haze is thin as breath on a window. The hum of servers becomes a kind of music. Fans sing. The building shifts a little as night cools deeper. Somewhere, a coffee machine clicks itself off. Far above, the dome rides its track and pauses, patient. The narrator takes you into a gentle memory. A school desk, a pencil, a circle traced again and again until the paper thins. Orbits are like that, patient circles worn into the fabric of space. Here, the circle is stretched, touched by something the pencil cannot show. The circle wants to confess, but something asks it to wait. A message board lights up with short notes from other watchers. Seeing slight offset as well. Check your time sync, but same here. The time servers are fine. The clocks in the machines agree with clocks on the wall. Seconds line up like neat bricks. They compare against GPS pulses. Everything beats together. And still the drift keeps that ghost step. Someone wonders aloud softly, almost a secret, if a signal could ride inside the turn. Not a radio signal, not yet. A pattern signal, a shape. Could the path itself carry a form of speech? It is not a wild idea so much as a dream. The kind that rises in quiet rooms when sleep is near and the brain loosens its grip. They do not chase it. Not yet. They write it in small letters in the notebook's margin. Could the turn be a code? Then they go back to the numbers, because numbers, for now, are kinder than wishes. The room returns to cadence. Click, scroll, save. The object is plotted against models that account for everything they can name. Solar wind, thermal release, subtle pressure from light. Each model reduces the error, but not to zero. The last bit remains like a grain of sand in a shoe. It is not enough to declare a discovery. It is not small enough to ignore. Hours pass. Their voices stay calm so minds can stay steady. The documentary tone holds you, draws your breathing into a slow tide. This is the work. The gathering of lines, the careful testing of each link in the chain. It is less about answers than about fair questions asked gently, again and again, until the sky replies. A new set of frames arrives. The stars sharpen as the air steadies. The silver thread extends. One researcher closes their eyes, listens to the hum, and imagines they are on a ship in a dark sea. The ship is silent. The sea is silent. Only a slight pull along the hull says the current is real. The current has no name. It moves as if guided. An omen cloaked in luminous haze. The notes on the whiteboard say, the word omen sits there like a pebble on fabric. No one likes it. But no. One erases it. They test for noise. They inject fake trails into control frames to see how the system responds. They check for a low-grade vibration in the mount. They ask the dome if it has developed a new creak. They run fingers along the cable. Nothing changes. In the plots, the small nudge remains. When they speak of hope, they do it softly. Hope is not a trumpet here. It is a candle. Worry is also a candle, right beside it. Their flames lean in the same draft. The two lights share the same air. What if the silence is not empty? What if the silence is the message itself? The question floats in the data room, too large to catch and too quiet to let go. If there is meaning, it might live not in a loud transmission, but in the careful pattern, a quiet defiance of the usual rhythm, a choice to turn where nature would glide. The screens dim to a night mode palette, blues and charcoal, and the occasional silver pixel. Outside, dawn is still far. The dome sits like a resting whale under a sky that never truly sleeps. Inside, they keep watch, and the narrator stays with them, calm and patient, guiding the eye from line to line, from the stable to the strange. Somewhere, past perihelion, a small body moves with a grace that should not be there. Or perhaps the grace has always been there, and only now do we have the patience to see it. They save the session and begin another. The keys click. The file names are neat, as if neatness could make the universe kinder. You can almost hear the object moving, not as sound, but as intention steady, secret, soft. The monitors become a slow river. The points drift like petals on its surface, and the story carries forward on its own gentle current. Nothing breaks the quiet, and nothing answers it. Yet in the cradle of that silence, something waits. The room breathes as one. The thread extends, a silver line so slight it could be a dream. And in the drifting quiet of the observatory, the silence deepened. Yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The night opens like a slow curtain. A soft glow spills across the page of history. We drift, quiet as dust, through memories that still hum with wonder. The first echo is a shockwave, an unseen hand brushing a remote river valley. Trees laid down like wheat after a storm. People far away felt the air shiver. Windows quivered. No crater stayed to tell the whole tale. Only fallen trunks, pointing outward, like the rays of a silent sun. That moment lives in records and in the hush of the forest. It feels close even now, as if the world still waits for the last whisper of what passed above. Then another memory opens. Dawn lifts its pale face, and a single meteor writes a sudden line in the sky. It brightens, then breaks like a fragile shell. The air thunders. Light washes the rooftops in a cold flash. Minutes later, the ground answers with a tremble that moves through streets and kitchens and schoolrooms. People stand in doorways, blinking. They look up for answers that never come, not fully. In their voices, the morning keeps that astonished tone, part fear, part awe. The sky heals, blue again, yet a rumor of something vast lingers at the edges of thought. We turn to old comets, the ancient travelers. They do not walk straight lines. Their paths wobble and widen as if a hidden thread tugs at them. Some split, trailing beads of ice and dust, a broken necklace across the night. Others dim when math expects them to shine. They shed material that jets into space like tiny thrusters, tilting their orbits just enough to puzzle the patient record keepers. An orbit seems simple on paper, ellipses and numbers, but out there, sunlight itself is a force. Ice becomes gas. Gas becomes push. The trajectory whispers, and the whisper bends the path. These stories rest in the snowfall of archival paper. Shelves hold stacks of notes with soft edges and penciled stars. In the quiet of an observatory, a page turns, and the sound is like a wing. A spectrograph hums. A telescope breathes as it tracks the slow crawl of a comet across the sensor. The air smells faintly of dust and cold metal. Red lights keep the night gentle, and chairs remember the weight of watchers who waited through long hours. We can almost hear their voices in a low murmur, the talk of absorption lines, the trace of sodium, the breath of carbon. They map the starlight like cartographers mapping a coast. Beyond these rooms, galaxy clusters gather like cities of flame in the deep. They murmur not with sound, but with gravity itself. Their mass bends paths in time. Behind them, light from distant galaxies bends too, curved by an invisible hand. The universe is patient with its puzzles. It lets us approach one careful step at a time, measuring, guessing, checking, and then measuring again. If there is a pattern, it does not shout. It waits in the calm, asking us to listen without leaning too hard. So we come to the traveler that arrived not long ago, slipping into the sun's realm at a strange angle. Oumuamua, a name like a doorway, a messenger from far away. It did not act like the comets we know. It showed no quick, bright tail, no fuzzy coma. It simply glided, slim and shy, like a drifting shadow cut from the night. Its path was a touch too fast, a touch too light, as if sunlight itself had nudged it. Scientists had traced its orbit frame by frame, modeling the curve with careful math. The numbers fit, then wriggled, and fit again in a better way. Spectroscopy strained for a hint of what it was made of. The telescopes drank the last photons as it faded toward the dark. Every case, every anomaly, stands like a small bell in the mind. When we tap them, Tunguska, the breaking dawn meteor, the odd comets, the silent visitor, they ring with a similar tone. Not the same note, not an answer, but a feeling of something unfinished. A pattern, perhaps. A page turned halfway. A letter signed, but not sealed. It is tempting to weave a grand thread through them all. It is natural to search for a single story, the hidden law, the messenger with one clear message. But science steadies the hand. It asks for patience. It reminds us that coincidence is common, that nature loves variety, and that our eyes can be too eager. Still, the mind gathers them. It cannot help it. In the cradle of silence, it lays each piece down. A shockwave without a crater. A meteor that shredded the morning into sound. Comets that wander with a push that is almost nothing, yet not nothing. And then that long, dim mark in the sky we named a scout. What if, the mind asks, these are all rehearsals, small practice rooms of the universe where we learn to listen better? What if the pattern is not about them, but about us, about how our tools, our math, and our patience grow? In an old logbook, a line of ink says, weather, clear. Another says, seeing, fair. Calm words for uncertain nights. The observer writes the time, checks the clock against the red glow of the control panel, and feels the tick of the dome's motor in the floorboards. A thin whir, a faint click. The telescope locks onto the target. Starlight becomes numbers. Numbers become a curve. The curve is a story written without letters. It has a start, a turn, and a drift into dusk. If we read it right, it tells us what touched the comet, how fast the traveler spun, and whether gas left its surface like a sigh. If we read it wrong, the story folds into static. So we try again. We build new models, the way a potter builds bowls, each better at holding the water of truth. Orbit modeling is a patient art. You feed the path with small corrections and ask how the future will arc. You add sunlight pressure, the faint push of photons that arrive like gentle rain. You test a non-gravitational term, a tiny placeholder for outgassing or something like it. You let computers roam through possibilities like bees over a field. The best answers do not feel bold. They feel calm. They fit the data without forcing it. And if they carry a question forward, they do so honestly. Here's the part we still do not know. Spectrographs are different tools for different questions. Some sniff for water. Some look for carbon chains. Some listen to the sun's light, reflected from a strange surface, and pull it apart like threads. A bit more red, a bit less blue. A dip where a certain molecule sips the light. It all builds a story in small, careful pieces. A comet's chemistry is an origin myth written in ice. A rock's reflectance curve is a fingerprint. When we set Oumuamua among these measures, we found puzzles. Not impossible things, but uncomfortable things. Things that asked for a new angle, a new test. And always, there is the patient blink of stars. Telescopes scan and scan, finding not just one visitor, but thousands of regulars. Near-Earth rocks, faint comets, distant ripples of supernova light. The regulars teach us the baseline. They show us how most things behave. Only then can we spot the soft kink in the line, the outlier that might matter. The quiet work is the strong work, night after night, year after year. Many mysteries shrink under that soft pressure. Some do not. Those are the ones we remember. We walk then through dusty observatories in our minds, feeling the echo of past footsteps. The astronomer who wrote in blue ink. The engineer who tuned a motor so the dome would glide. The intern who watched a screen and counted pixels one by one. Their work is a chain. It links the fallen trees to the dawn flash, the wobbled comets to the thin visitor arcing away. The link is not a single claim. It is the slow rise of skill. When the next anomaly passes, our hands are steadier because of them. There is a kindness in that. Not every question must be solved at once. Some questions train us. They let us fail, then try again with clearer eyes. A shock wave can teach us the language of air. A bright fireball can teach us the strength of windows and the shape of sound. A wandering comet can teach us how tiny forces add up over long distances. And a silent scout can teach us to look for the small pushes, the kind a photon gives, or a whisper of gas, or a texture we did not think mattered. So when we set Oumuamua among these echoes, we do it carefully. Not as a harbinger only, and not as a harmless wanderer only, but as a teacher in passing. Maybe it carried a message without meaning to, that our math can hear shapes, even when our eyes cannot see edges. That silence can hold form. The clues are like curves in timing, angles, and rates. The answers are not final. They rest on the table like tools at dusk, clean and ready for the next night. The pattern, if there is one, replies in a polite tone. It says, "Stay calm, keep checking." It does not promise that the unknown is friendly. It does not warn that it is not. It simply exists, beckoning with the quiet confidence of space itself. We breathe and listen. We let the memory of past mysteries fold over us like a gentle veil. In that veil, a shape seems to form, nothing loud, nothing certain. Just a form, felt more than seen. And as the last page of the night turns, we feel the math begin to hum. Not the big voice of thunder, but a soft note under the surface, a hidden rhythm that waits for patient ears. It is the sense that inside the long silence of data, a figure is about to emerge, faint at first, then steady, and in that figure, perhaps, a truth about travelers we have barely learned to greet. The glow fades to the horizon, and the room grows still, but in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. The room is dim, washed in the soft glow of monitors. On the screens, a line of data curves like a brushstroke across night. It seems simple at first, just a track, just a path, just a comet turning through a field of starlight. But when the team fits the trajectory, when they press numbers into place like careful stitches, a soft code begins to appear. It is a reply without a voice, a signature made not of ink but of motion. Something small, something steady, touches the curve. It is as if the sky leans close and whispers, and the whisper turns the path by the slightest breath. Gravity does the obvious work. Gravity is the stagehand of the universe, quiet and tireless. It pulls at everything: comets, planets, dust, you forever guiding each step. Around the sun, gravity writes the great circle of an orbit. A comet falls in, sweeps around the furnace of light, then lifts back to the cold, tracing an ellipse like a story that remembers its beginning even as it ends. Kinds of curves matter here. A circle means balance, an ellipse means return, a parabola means escape. You can read them the way sailors read currents. You can feel their rhythm, even half asleep, as if the numbers hum a lullaby that keeps time with your breathing. But gravity does not live alone. The solar wind, thin as a dream, flows from the sun. Sunlight itself pushes, photon by photon, like a gentle hand on a paper boat. Most nights, the push is too small to notice. On other nights, it matters. A comet wears a veil of gas and dust when it warms. The veil catches light. The light gives a nudge. We call it non-gravitational acceleration. And for most comets, it comes with showy signs: jets of vapor, fans of dust, a plume unrolling into space like a silver scarf. When outgassing is strong, the curve shifts in a way we recognize. We have seen that shift 1,000 times. It is familiar, like tide marks, like fingerprints. So the team looks for the plume. Telescopes open their eyes. Sensors listen in quiet frequencies. The comet should breathe and haze should lift, like breath on cold air. But the images return with nothing loud in them. No rich tail unfurls. No smoky halo spreads. The body turns, yes, but the stage is strangely bare. The curve herds the numbers in a direction they do not expect, and it does this without the usual bright costume. The acceleration is real. The show is missing. They check the fit. They test their errors. They adjust for the way sunlight hits the surface. They add the pressure from photons, the tiny shove from particles that rage out of the sun. They model release of gas. They ask the software to consider texture, warmth, spin, every small manner by which an ancient traveler might tilt its face to light. They subtract starfills and thermal noise and the quiet heartbeat of the instruments themselves. Still, the turn does not relax. It keeps a shape like a suggestion that is firm. Perhaps it is mass-changing, someone says. But the mass seems steady. Perhaps it is a jet that hides, another suggests. But the jet never shows. The numbers, lined up in tidy columns beneath the glow, narrow the options until very little remains. And then a new sentence arrives, the kind that makes a room fall silent. The non-gravitational term is present without plume evidence. The curve obeys an unseen hand. You do not need to be an expert to feel the hush that follows. You can imagine it easily. A group of tired people, in love with the sky and its puzzle box ways, watching an orbit refuse the obvious path. In that quiet, you can almost hear the comet breathe anyway. You can almost sense a hidden rhythm, like a thing humming to itself while keeping its secrets. So the researchers step back and explain the simple parts, the way teachers do. Gravity, yes. They draw a circle, then stretch it into an ellipse with the soft tug of a pencil. Solar radiation pressure, yes. They compare it to a breeze on a seed drifting down. Comet outgassing, yes. They talk about sunlight warming ice, turning it into steam that rushes away, giving a tiny push in return. They say these things softly, as if laying a blanket making a bed for sleep. And then they return to the anomaly. The data show a drift that does not follow the rules they have learned. The star field remains clean. The telescope feeds them stark truth. The curve bends like a reed with no wind in sight. The path across the graphs grows personal. It is a line with a mood. It sways, then steadies. It leans, then holds. Each night adds a bead to the string, and the string reveals its pattern. Motion paints itself in ink on the dark, as slow as a prayer. You may be listening in a quiet room of your own. You may be drifting towards sleep, and that is fine. Sleep is a good place from which to look at the large and the long. When your mind floats, the sky floats. With it, you can watch the orbit breathe in and out. Numbers become bedside music. The columns march, but the cadence is gentle. A residual here, a sigma there. They settle like snow. And underneath them, like a bass line steady and low, rests the extra bit of push small, unshowy, yet present. It is in the curvature. It is in the whisper between points. It is the kind of thing that turns up when the universe is not trying to be surprising, and yet is. This is how science often feels at 2 in the morning. Not like thunder, but like a quiet knocking. You want to open the door, and you also want to stand still and listen a little longer. The team remembers comets that sputtered and turned with visible plumes. They remember the hot jets that pushed bodies sideways like hissing valves. They remember how numbers shouted those stories from the plots. Here, the numbers speak more softly. Here, the story is a drifting shadow that chooses not to be seen. Could it be a shape trick? If the body is uneven long like a sliver, flat like a shard, the way sunlight warms, it will be uneven too. Warm spots exhale more gas. Even if the gas is thin, it can push. If the spin is odd, the push may look steady when averaged across the hours. The modelers test this, spinning digital comets in a bath of light. Some runs land close. Others drift wide. The best fits hold the hand of the curve for a while and then let go. The code, like the comet, speaks in half answers. In stories of oceans, sailors once watched birds and read their wings as signs. In stories of space, researchers watch arcs and read their bends as messages. Is this arc a message? Is the turn a nod? Some people smile at that thought. Others flinch from it. The word messenger is heavy. It suggests purpose. Space often refuses that weight. Yet there is a kind of listening that does no harm. It holds the question and does not force an answer to hurry. In that kind of listening, the curve can be both physics and poetry. It can be a body changing heat into motion, and it can be a quiet hint, a bridge of maybe between worlds that watch each other and wonder. If you look up from the screens and out into the dark, the Milky Way runs like a river over the roof of the world. Nebulae bloom inside it like lantern smoke. Planets write their own letters, looping along, each held by the sun. Far away, exoplanets circle other stars, their pulls and pushes composing music we can barely hear. Against this wide score, one small acceleration seems like a soft drumbeat you notice only because the rest of the orchestra is so steady. But once you notice it, you cannot unhear it. The beat keeps time with your curiosity. The scientists keep their language careful. They say anomaly, not miracle. They say residual, not riddle. But in the quiet after the meeting, when the monitors dim and the chairs sit empty, even a careful mind can feel the echo of wonder. The ancient traveler turns. There is no plume to cloak it, no bright veil to distract. It rotates like a thought in a crowded head, and then the thought clears space around itself and stays. There is comfort here, too. Not every unusual thing is a threat. Some strange things are invitations to sharpen models, to build better instruments, to remember that even in a well-mapped sky, surprises exist. The turn that spoke in numbers does not shout for panic. It asks for patience. It asks for long nights and clear weather and calm eyes. It asks for hands steady on the controls and minds open enough to hold what they believe and what they do not yet know. Imagine floating beside it. You would see the sun as a bright coin. You would see the comet, mute and dark, turning like a slow key. You would feel nothing spaces like that, yet the view itself would lean into you, and you would lean back. In that drifting moment, it would be easy to accept that a small, steady push can change a life or a path or a plan. Tiny forces, long times. That is how rivers carve canyons. That is how starlight erases shadows. That is how a mystery, if you let it, writes itself carefully into your sleep. Back in the lab, the team writes it all down. They keep the curved shape, the quiet acceleration, the careful missing plume. They leave a margin for doubt and another for hope. Then they point the instruments again, ready to learn what the skin of this traveler can tell them. The glow on the monitors fades to black, and for a breath, the room is only the hum of machines and the thought of distance. The data rest. The question does not. In the cradle of silence, the curve seems to hold its breath with you soft, steady, and waiting while somewhere just beyond sight. Another layer readies itself to be seen. Under a soft lamp of starlight, a world presents its face. Not loud, not sharp, just a gentle gleam, as if light has learned to speak in whispers. The telescope holds still. The image settles. The frame is little more than a gray arc and a pale halo. Yet there is texture in the quiet. Something about the way the glow climbs and falls. A breath, a pulse. The kind of shimmer you notice only when you stop trying. In the control room, air hums through vents and instruments. The sound is a faint ocean in the walls, like the room itself remembers wind. Surfaces tell stories. Rock wears its story like scars. Ice keeps its story like sleep. Metal holds its story like a mirror, turning questions back toward the sky. With each new pass, the spectrograph gathers a thin rainbow of truth. It does not shout. It notes, it lists. It marks faint lines where elements drink and release starlight. The lines look like fence posts in a night field, short and even standing guard. Color shifts. Albedo rises and falls. The data is cool to the touch, and yet the heart feels a small lift when a valley of shadow brightens a fraction more than expected. Asteroid rock is blunt with light. It is dark, like charcoal, with rough grains that trap the sun. When rock turns, it flashes only where angles are kind. Comet ice behaves like a quiet lake under moonlight. It returns light in broad, soft sheets. It sometimes sheds a haze, a veil of tiny grains blowing off like breath in winter. Metal, though metal can be something else. It can gleam with a focused mind, returning light like a thought. When polished, when thin, when tuned, the telescope cannot see polish. But the curve of brightness across a rotation can show whether a skin is rough or smooth, scattered or sleek. In the early nights, scientists compare catalogs. They look back through cases where albedo rose high and then fell, like a gull slipping across waves. They write down the shapes of light. A rocky body with dust will often show broken patterns. A comet nucleus will soften those breaks with frost. But what if the curve is clean? What if it glides like a thin sail taut with wind, even when the wind is only photons? No claim is made. No banner is lifted. The idea is not pushed. It's floated, careful and light, like a paper boat on a black river, following the current wherever it goes. The spectrograph speaks again. Faint lines. Slight dips where sunlight disappears in tiny amounts, eaten by atoms and dust and the quiet moods of surface grain. Water ice leaves a fingerprint. So do silicates. So does carbon that has spent a long time under space. Tonight the lines are faint but neat. They line up with minerals common to rubble and frost. Yet the color curve, the way blue yields to red, the way the reflectance changes as the body rolls, has a bright edge that is hard to ignore. It's as if a portion of the surface catches light like a sail's belly catching wind. For a moment the room holds that thought in the throat. They have seen sails in dreams. Thin films that drink light and answer. You could build one from carbon sheets only atoms thick, or from polished foil drawn to a silence so pure you forget it is there. You could cut it into panels that fold like wings. A craft like that would not need fuel. It would lean into the sun the way a child leans into a warm breeze. It would remember the physics of a dandelion seed and the patience of a leaf. The telescope does not show wings. It shows only the dance of brightness, the measure of a face. That returns fire in a controlled way. Ice would behave differently. Near the sun, it would lift vapor and shine with a halo. It would leave a hint of a tail, even a small one, like a chalk line drawn across the dark. The spectrograph would catch gas singing its thin song. Rock would keep its lines steady, its shine modest, broken by pits and shadows. A sail in exotic skin would carry a different logic. It could be tuned to certain colors. It could reflect more at one angle than another. It might glint in a way that repeats with each rotation, a regular blink that keeps steady time like the sweep of a lighthouse. Tonight, timing and light curve sit together on the screen like careful handwriting. Albedo is the word for a surface's honesty with light. High albedo returns most of what it receives. Low albedo keeps its gift, warms, and does not share. The target tonight leans toward the high, but not always. As it rolls, one side brightens with a gentle slope, then falls off fast, as if a panel passes through the line of sight. The gentle slope says, I am broad and smooth. The quick fall says, I have an edge. Not a sharp cliff, more like a seam that vanishes when it turns away. The air system hums on. It is the only sound. The team watches the trace crawl like a quiet river, carrying secrets downstream. They try models. Imagine an irregular rock with ice patches. The curve improves, but the bright edge blurs. Imagine a nucleus shedding dust. Better, but too soft. Imagine a sheet, thin as a whisper, angled to the sun. The curve tightens. But they do not let the model become the truth. They hold it near, yet keep it in the future, where it belongs. In the past, many signals looked strange until they looked ordinary again. In the present, the telescope simply collects. In the future, if the pattern holds, the story may sharpen. That is the calm promise of science. Let the sky write first. We read after. There is a thought that lingers in the room. Could a skin be tuned to starlight? Materials exist that change with light, that heat and cool with tiny shifts in color. Some surfaces bend light in ways that feel like magic but are only math. What if the unknown carries a patchwork of such skins, each one answering a different note of the sun? A hidden panel could turn on when the spectrum sings its part. A darker panel could hide in shadow until needed. Nothing in the data proves this. Nothing forbids it either. The idea glows like a coal, small and steady, warming the space between facts. Metal is not the only path to shimmer. Frost can mimic polish. Fresh ice can sparkle like glass when the angle is kind. Dust can harden into crust that behaves like a mirror for a moment. Even a field of tiny particles, close together, can act like a sheet when light arrives just so. The team lists these options. They anchor each guess with a reason, then float it on the slow river of light. They remember that many anomalies are messengers from the ordinary, dressed in unusual clothes. Yet they also remember that not everything must fold back into the usual. Some stories arrive to widen the map. Hours pass. The target moves. The glow softens as distance grows. They sweep through filters from blue to near infrared, taking the body's temperature by color alone. The numbers calm them. They do not jump. They drift. The drift lines blend into a steady hum in the mind, like a soft engine far away. On the plot, the best fit line leans toward materials we know. The small residual, what remains when subtraction is done, keeps a hint of something tidy and thin. It is a whisper at the edge of hearing, the kind of thing you notice in the final moments before sleep, when the brain loosens and truth and dream stand side by side. In the next days, decoders will meet the data, not to force it, but to listen for patterns hidden inside the pattern. There may be a rhythm in the shimmer, a sequence in the way brightness turns and returns. The team will check phase angles and viewing geometry. They will test whether the same bright edge appears no matter where the sun stands. If it does, an internal order may be at work. If it does not, the shine may be a trick of light, a friendly trick, but a trick all the same. Either way, the work will be quiet. The tools will be gentle. The goal is to hear the whisper without making it shout. For now, the telescope closes its eye. The room exhales. The hum of air remains unwavering, like the breath of space made earthly. The observers step back from their screens and feel the odd peace that often follows careful work. It is the peace of knowing that a surface, somewhere far away, has spoken in tiny glints and soft veils. It is the peace of not needing to decide too soon. Outside, the night is a cradle of silence. Stars lie like seeds on black soil. In that drifting quiet, the shimmer that began as a question settles into a soft afterglow, and in that glow, something patient waits to be understood. The screen opens on a quiet sky. Not black, not empty, just a soft glow where the sun's breath thins into darkness. A single dot crosses that gentle veil. It is small, almost a drifting shadow, but it moves with a steadiness that feels like thought. If the message is not in radio, perhaps it is in motion. Perhaps the line it draws is a sentence. Perhaps the pauses are commas. Perhaps the turn at the sun is a whispered word. The film lays out a bedtime simple cipher. Time, angle, velocity, 3 notes forming a quiet chord. Time, when the dot appears, when it speeds up, when it slows. Angle, how its path tilts against the ecliptic, how the arc bends in the planet-lit dark. Velocity, how fast it falls toward the sun, how fast it climbs away. 3 numbers changing together, like a soft waltz you can count with your breathing. 1, 2, 3. Again, they call this traveler Oumuamua, the scout, an ancient visitor moving through the cradle of silence around our star. It glided past perihelion, the closest brush with the sun, and the trajectory shifted, just a touch. To the untrained eye, it is nothing more than a pencil mark nudged by a fingertip. To a telescope, to a spectrograph, to the minds who keep night watch, that nudge is script, a possible stroke of meaning in the sky's margin notes. Scientists test what they can test. They begin with the careful, patient work. The null hypothesis that nothing odd is happening at all. Maybe sunlight itself, solar radiation pressure, gives a gentle push to the object's broad face, like wind to a leaf. Maybe gas venting from hidden ice mimics a tiny engine, the way comets often breathe. Maybe the instruments carry a subtle bias, a calibration whispering just off key. Every idea is given time. Every explanation is set on the table, turned in the light and examined for flaws. The voice of the documentary stays calm, as if speaking to someone drifting towards sleep. "We do not rush the unknown," it says. "We listen for it." The film shows whiteboards with careful angles, curves fitted to data points, dots like stars on graph paper. Orbit solutions are tried, then revised. Telescopes compare brightness over nights, measuring how the ancient traveler tumbles, how its shape hides and reveals slivers of sun. A comet would show a tail. A standard asteroid would keep its speed. This one does something almost, but not quite familiar. Time, angle, velocity. On the screen, 3 lines rise and fall across the days. The intervals echo. A small increase here, a pause there, a mirrored rise later, like a refrain. The pauses matter. In music, silence is not empty. It is part of the measure. The same seems true here. Between bursts of acceleration, there is the stillness of coasting. Between changes of angle, there is the quiet of a steady heading. The pattern is gentle, not forced, like a breath you hardly notice until you listen. But patterns can seduce the eye. The film does not promise a cipher where chance might suffice. The patient voice reminds us that the universe makes rhythms by accident all the time. Moons lock into resonance. Comets flare as they spin sunward. Dust bands ring Saturn in evenly spaced threads. Our minds are tuned for melody and message. We must be careful with wonder and still keep it. So the tests deepen. Teams feed models with sunlight, with thermal lag, with the way flat shapes catch photons differently than thick ones. They try needles, pancakes, shattered shards, anything that could explain the object's tumbling brightness. They ask whether a surface might be as smooth as ice or as dark as charcoal, whether a fragile, foam-like body could feel the sun's push more than solid rock ever would. They check for biases in the telescopes, for hidden assumptions in the code. They weigh every unexplained twist like a jeweler examining a rare stone for cracks. As Oumuamua climbs the long slope away from the sun, the arc it draws begins to read like handwriting you almost recognize. Does it favor one kind of turn left rather than right? Shallow rather than sharp? Does it repeat a pace fast, slow, fast as if keeping time to a clock not our own? The narrative lingers on the screen, highlighting these motions without judgment. The goal is not to declare, but to notice, to let the audience feel the difference between noise and a quiet chord that returns again and again. You watch from the dark of your room, your breathing slow, your mind soft at the edges. The film offers images more than answers, a cometary model fading, a solar pressure curve that nearly fits, a simulated shard that tumbles just a bit too quickly. It is like testing keys in an old lock. Some slide in, some turn a quarter of a circle and stop. One almost clicks, then refuses. The message, if it's there, is shy. Astronomy has always been a language of triangles and patience. To measure an orbit is to sketch a triangle between you, the object, and the distant stars. One triangle for tonight, another for tomorrow, and after enough nights, a path appears, a trajectory that reveals the visitor's story. In that story, time is the punctuation, angle is the grammar, velocity is the voice. Together, they can be read if you are willing to read slowly. There are small wonders in the details. When the object passes perihelion, the sunlight is strongest. If the push comes from photons, that is when you would expect the most change. The film shows a simple chart, an expected curve versus a measured one. They do not match perfectly, but they do not disagree loudly either. A gentle mismatch, a nudge off the line. Is that a clue or a coincidence? The voice does not say. It lets the question hover like starlight reflected on a still lake. We are reminded that the sky contains many alphabets. The dancing lights of auroras speak magnetism. The colors of a spectrograph speak chemistry. The dimming of a star whispers the transit of an exoplanet. If motion is a code, then the alphabet might be made of intervals and arcs, of lags and leads, of bends and rests. Imagine a sentence where every letter is a turn, every vowel a pause, every consonant a change in speed. Could a civilization write such a sentence across a solar system? Could physics alone write the same sentence by chance? The film does not argue. It invites. It points to old anomalies, comets that acted strange, asteroids that hummed with odd rotations, and shows how, with time, most found natural explanations. It adds that even when mysteries fade, the memory of wonder remains. You can feel that memory now, like a gentle weight in your chest. It is not fear. It is hope wearing a scientist's coat, hope that the universe might speak in more than one tongue. We drift across a quiet montage. Telescopes open like silver flowers at dusk. Screens fill with numbers. A hand steadies a mug, steam curling in the blue glow of data. A researcher rubs tired eyes, then smiles at a curve that fits a little better than yesterday's. Progress is small and soft and steady. This is how science moves, not in shouts, but in careful steps and shared notes. When doubt rises, because doubt always does, the film offers the gentle practice of falsification. Try to prove yourself wrong. If the pattern survives honest tests, it might be real. If it fades under a brighter lamp, it was a trick of shadow. In either case, you learn. The documentary repeats this like a lullaby. Learning is the goal, not the answer you wish for. Far from the sun now, the traveler is dim. Its trail is less a line than a suggestion, a memory written in the margins of the night. The instruments still follow, measuring the way starlight flickers as it rotates, counting the seconds between glints. The intervals still echo. Not perfectly. Not with the bite of a clock. More like the repeated hush in ocean waves. Almost regular, almost musical, almost saying something. The camera returns to the ancient traveler's path, now drawn as a faint ribbon across a dark sphere. You can trace the moment of closest approach, the slight acceleration, the soft exhale of speed as distance grows. Time, angle, velocity. 3 notes. A chord that may be nothing more than some light sigh on a fragile body. Or a chord that carries a hint of intention, too delicate to declare, too steady to ignore. If this is a code, what alphabet does the night use? The film offers no glossary. It offers listening. A slow pan across the Milky Way, a river of stars in patient drift. Somewhere out there, comets are writing their cursive loops. Planets are keeping time in silent orbits. Nebulae are folding new dust into old light. The universe is busy and quiet at once, like a city heard from far away. At last the voice lowers, almost a whisper. We have learned to hear radio. We have learned to read light. We are learning to read motion. The music thins to a single sustained note, a thread you could follow into sleep. The screen holds on the traveler's faint track, a pale scratch on a dark canvas. Meaning does not jump forward. It waits, calm and unhurried, as if it knows the patient minds will come back to look again. The glow fades. The chord time, angle, velocity lingers in the mind like a lullaby you cannot quite place. The sky seems a little fuller, the silence a little deeper. Out beyond the last bright planet. An ancient messenger continues on, and in its drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. A soft glow gathers behind the darkness, thin as breath on winter glass. The camera glides across the night, and what looks like a flat sheet of black begins to rise and ripple. A nebula unfolds like a gentle veil. A galaxy cluster hangs far away, small as a memory you almost forgot. The sky seems empty at first glance, but the longer you look, the more it fills threads of dust. Rivers of starlight, drifting shadow against a sea of quiet fire. Astronomers know this well. Point a telescope toward the empty patches and the emptiness answers. A spectrograph pulls color apart and finds the faint fingerprints of atoms. Hydrogen whispers. Oxygen sighs. In the cool spaces between stars, grains of carbon float like seeds on slow wind. Even the darkness has texture. Even silence has shape. Now the mind turns to the question hidden inside that quiet. If a messenger crossed this field, where did it begin? The search for a launch point starts simple. Picture a star not far from ours in the grand scale. A place where someone once watched our sun dim and brighten by a small beat. To them, Earth was an exoplanet, a dark coin passing over a golden face. From that star, curiosity could have risen like heat. Maybe they saw signs, the soft color of water, the steady rhythm of orbit, and they wondered. A messenger might have lifted from that shore, set on a careful trajectory, using gravity like stepping stones. Or maybe the origin lies near a pulsar, the strangest lighthouse you will ever meet. A pulsar spins, and its beams sweep the galaxy with a metronome so exact that time itself could be tuned to it. Long ago, we learned to use those pulses as a clock. Others could have done the same. A spacecraft leaving such a place might align its path with those flashes, like a ship at sea steering by a beacon. The pulses mark a route through the dark, a pattern no storm can wash away. There's another gate, quieter still, the edge around a black hole. Not the violent mouth, but the calm ring beyond it where orbits settle into long, patient loops. Here, gravity is a language. A craft meant for long sleep may choose these arcs, borrowing momentum in gentle brushes, each pass a whisper of speed, each exit a promise to keep going. From far away, you would not see it. You would see only a drifting shadow against deep night, a small silence moving through greater silence. Origins can also bloom from ruin. A supernova tears a star apart, but it leaves behind gifts. In the debris field, heavy elements spread like confetti across a cosmic floor. Iron, nickel, calcium for bones not yet imagined. Some of that debris forms clumps, and some clumps harden into worlds. Within that chaos, a clever maker could find raw material strong enough to hold a dream for 1,000,000 years. A messenger, born from the ashes of a giant, would carry part of that giant with it, a spark from a fire now cold. And there are rivers beneath this sky, stellar streams that wrap the galaxy like ribbons. Stars that once belonged to smaller galaxies get pulled apart and stretched into long, thin currents. A craft that knows these streams can ride them, like a leaf riding a tide. Little energy is needed if you know where the water flows. It does not rush. It persists. The Milky Way is not still. It breathes. Everything slides, drifts, nudges. Orbits weave around orbits. Even the sun travels, drawing its planets with it, the whole family slipping through a larger ocean. This is why the sky is never truly blank. This is why origins are many. A scientist maps them on a board with chalk or code. Circles for orbits. Arrows for trajectories. Dotted lines for possible encounters with comet clouds or the shoulders of gas giants. The model hums. The numbers show that a thing can wander for ages and still arrive on time. Long arcs are not wasteful. They are wise. If this messenger is real, it does not come shouting. It prefers soft steps. In deep space, loud is hard. Energy is precious. And in a universe full of glare flares from young stars, bursts from magnetars, hot disks around new suns, noise gets lost. Sleep listens better than noise. A drifting shadow is easy to miss, but impossible to forget once you notice it. It crosses a beam of starlight and changes the beam's song by a hair. It shifts a comet's path by a breath. It tells the spectrograph, "I am here," without ever raising its voice. Imagine it starting from that other star, where someone watched our sun as we watched theirs. They could time a launch to meet our orbit gently. They could nudge the craft with small burns, leaning on the slow push of stellar wind. They could aim for the outskirts of our system first, letting the messenger dip into our gravity like a bird catching a warm current near a cliff face. A swing by a gas giant adds a little speed, just enough to step down toward the inner planets without fire. No drama, no fireworks. Only careful math wrapped in patience. Or imagine the pulsar path. The craft checks its clock against the pulses as it coasts. It counts beats. It holds course. It passes through regions where dust thickens in the fog, past a nebula faint as breath. The dust clings, then falls away. Along the edge of a supernova remnant, it finds calm water. The turbulence spent centuries ago. The messenger glides on, small and stubborn, an ancient traveler with narrow eyes. Close in, all the small things matter. Radiation hums. Micrometeoroids tap the hull like rain on a tent. Every scuff adds a line to its history. We might read those lines one day the way geologists read layers of rock or biologists read rings in a tree. A dent tells about a fast grain of iron. A patch of glare tells about a naked hour beside a flare. The craft is a journal written in scuffs and shine. Not drama. Evidence. There is also the black hole gate. We speak it softly because the words alone feel heavy. The messenger would never dive through the throat where nothing returns. Instead, it takes the wide road, an orbit far beyond the danger, where space-time bows but does not break. There, the craft skates around the curve, steals a little momentum, and exits with a new path carved into the dark. It is not magic. It is gravity doing what gravity always does. The trick is knowing when to lean and when to let go. Back on Earth, the instruments lean in, as if they can hear. Telescopes track, not blinking. Receivers cool to near absolute zero, so faint signals can rise above thermal hiss. A spectrograph spreads starlight into delicate threads and searches for a line that shouldn't be there. Something shifted, something hidden behind the expected colors. Computers compare nights. Astronomers compare years. They listen for the same gentle beat. They chart tiny changes in trajectory, the way someone might watch a leaf on a slow river and guess which bend it will reach by dusk. They also search the archives. The messenger may have passed by the edges of our machines before and left a thin note. A dip in brightness here, a whisper of heat there, a narrow shadow crossing a field where no asteroid belongs. Past data becomes a map of roads we did not know we traveled. With each clue, the path back to the origin grows clearer. Maybe that other star becomes more likely. Maybe the pulsar idea tightens like a knot. Maybe the black hole lane holds. Why would anyone send a drifting shadow and not a bright, loud signal? Because loud can be frightening. Loud can die fast. Loud assumes you are awake. A shadow, on the other hand, can wait. It can cross a planet's orbit again and again until the watchers are ready. It does not shout. It arrives. It speaks in the language of light and the grammar of gravity. Sleep listens better than noise. A world on the edge of rest, a species with a million thoughts at once, might only hear what approaches in kindness. There is a human piece to this as well. People who study the sky carry hope like a small lamp cupped in two hands. They know how fragile attention can be. They know wonder needs space. So they build tools that do not force an answer, but invite it. They seek places where silence is a fortress, radio quiet valleys, mountaintops above the hum of cities, deserts where the air stays clean and still. In these places, the sky feels close, like breath on your cheek. Here, a messenger made of shadow seems possible. Here, you believe that light has a voice and that you can learn to hear it. In time, origins become more than dots on a map. They become stories, a star that watched us the way we watch it, a pulsar that kept time like a friend tapping the table, a black hole that bowed space enough for a quiet slingshot, a supernova that gave the bones of the messenger their strength, stellar streams that carried it like an old river carries a fallen leaf toward a calm bay. None of these need drama to matter. They only need patience, and patience is something the universe has in endless supply. So the camera lingers. The nebula fades to a smudge. The galaxy cluster softens into a pale scatter. The field of nothing looks full again, layered with orbits, with dust, with faint heat, with possible paths. In the foreground, unseen, something small continues on its way. It neither hurries nor waits. It holds course, letting light speak for it, letting gravity guide it, letting time do what time does. And as the instruments on Earth lean closer, the air itself seems to hush. The sky, vast and dark, feels like a room where someone has just told you a secret in a voice so low you lean forward without thinking. The glow recedes, the stars steady, and in that great stillness, a question opens, not demanding, not loud, just wide and patient, like a door left ajar. The night grows deeper, and in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Red LEDs glow like embers in the control room. Screens float in the dark like small moons. Outside, steel dishes tilt with slow, careful grace, as if they are listening with their whole bodies. The night is wide and patient. Cables hum. Servers breathe. People speak in half voices because the air feels thin with attention. Every key press is a ripple through the quiet. Somewhere far away, starlight crosses a cold vacuum, and radio waves drift like a gentle tide. Here, in this cradle of silence, the work is simple to say and hard to do. Find a whisper in a storm. Telescopes come in many shapes, but all of them share a single purpose. They gather faint things and make them feel close. The big radio dishes drink in long, lazy waves that roll through space. Optical mirrors hold a sharper shine, turning starlight into pictures and spectra-thin rainbows that tell what elements burn in distant suns. Between them, there are arrays, spread out families of antennas that combine their signals to act like one giant ear. When they move together, when timing is right to the heartbeat of a microsecond, their listening becomes narrow and deep, like peering through a keyhole into a crowded room. Engineers fight noise first. The sky hums. Earth hums. Our phones, planes, and power lines. They call it interference, and it comes in spikes and smears, in lines that crawl across the band like scratches on foam. To swallow the static, they cool receivers until they whisper. They shield rooms with copper. They flag and throw away anything that rings like a local device. They average signals over long minutes, then longer hours. They tune filters that are so thin you could slide a single note of a violin through them and block the rest of the orchestra. Noise falls when you wait. It falls when you stack and smooth and let the random parts cancel themselves out. What stays might be real. The spectrograph is a patient tool. It splits light into a small rainbow and measures how bright each color is. With radio, the colors are frequencies heard stacked like rungs on a ladder. A normal star spreads its power across many rungs. A narrowband signal, the kind a machine might make, stands tall and thin on just one. A single spike can feel like a drumbeat in a quiet hall. But the trick is this: a spike is not enough. Lightning can make a spike. A passing satellite can make one too. A true messenger should follow the laws of motion, the slow dance of Earth spinning, Earth orbiting, the source drifting on the sky. If the spike moves in the right way, with the right curve, then the whisper has a path, not just a pitch. That is the heart of the whisper test. Imagine a child in a crowded playground, closing their eyes to find a friend. The child listens not for the exact word, but for the way the voice comes and goes as the friend walks past a wall, then a slide, then the far swing. The pattern of movement says more than the sound itself. Telescopes do the same. They track how a signal bends and slides because the Earth turns at a known speed. Frequencies shift a little, like the pitch of a siren changing as an ambulance passes. Engineers call it Doppler. It is a tiny, steady drift. If a signal's drift matches the sky's clock, it earns a second look. In this chapter's story, there was a night when the scan heard nothing. Nothing that met the first rule anyway. No bright, thin spike at the expected frequency band. The team had done all the normal steps. Calibrate, point, listen, dwell, recheck. The red LEDs glowed. A dish panned. A server sighed. Empty. It felt like a door closed without a sound. They logged the null as they always do and stepped through the logs to begin again. And then, small and strange, one of them noticed a curve tucked into the data. Not in the band, but in the way the signal's path leaned across time. It was almost rude in how quiet it was. No headline line. Just a gentle slope that repeated when the dish swept a certain way. The pattern didn't land where they expected. It landed in motion, like a shadow moving on a wall, not the light itself. The team circled the plot. Someone called for a replay of the raw stream, unbinned, unsmoothed. Another checked the weather, the satellite catalog, the maintenance notes. They tried different polarizations. They cut out chunks near known aircraft channels. The curve still sat there, so soft you could miss it if you blinked. But if you stared, it felt steady, like a breath you could sink to. Engineers live by checklists, and this one was no different. Could it be a plane? They looked for echoes that grow brighter and then fade in seconds. Not this. A satellite? They traced orbital tracks. The timing did not agree. A nearby device? They powered down a rack, then another. Then the coffee machine that sometimes leaked a squeal at odd hours. The curve stayed. They flipped to an optical array and took a quiet spectrum of the star field in that direction, hoping for a flare or a comet or some bright weather on a distant world. The spectrograph showed normal starlight and a thin line of interstellar hydrogen. Beautiful, but not a clue. They perform what they call a drift scan, letting the sky move across the fixed beams so the Earth's spin paints a line. The pattern repeated in the same part of the scan. That was the odd gift repetition without an obvious voice. A message without words, only the trace of a footstep in sand. In the lab's language, they adjusted their matched filters, little templates that lock onto expected movements. They tried a family of curves, straight, bowed, spiral, as if laying different keys on the same lock. The signal nodded to one of them. The match was not strong enough to claim a find, but it was strong enough to hold the room's attention. Midnight melted into 2 a.m. That's when the human side shows. Loneliness walks the corridor. You think about the people who used these rooms before you, the ones who waited with the same hope, the same fear that silence means we are alone. You drink water. You stretch. You listen to the beige noise of fans and the low, soft tone of a distant UPS. You remember a teacher telling you that the universe is not quiet. We are just small. You look back at the screen, and a small piece of you dares to believe that the curve is not a trick of numbers, but the thin edge of a real thing moving where no one expected. Silence can be design. That thought arrives slowly, not as certainty, but as a possibility shaped like a door. If a clever builder wanted to talk only to careful minds, they might hide their message in motion rather than in a band. A clear tone is easy to jam, easy to mimic. Motion is tied to physics, to orbits, to rotations, to the quiet ballet of gravity. A thing that moves in a law-abiding way says, I am part of this universe with you. It does not shout. It nods. And so the whisper test becomes a way to ask the sky, are you hiding in the path instead of the pitch? The team logged their steps with the neatness of sailors noting stars. They saved every setting. They set a watch schedule for repeat scans at different sidereal times, the sky's own clock, not the one on a wall. They widened the search window by a hair, not much, just enough to catch a curve that might drift with a different origin. They added a second dish at a distant array, so that if a local glitch tried to act like a visitor, it would fail the test of geography. If two far-apart ears hear the same motion in the same way, belief gets a little less fragile. Outside, the dish turned again. It moved with that slow power that makes heavy things seem light. Stars wheeled overhead. A thin cloud brushed the dome and kept going. Somewhere, an ancient traveler, a comet, a piece of rock, a shard of ice slid along its long, lonely path, not knowing anyone watched. The servers kept their beat. The control room lights softened, as if the whole building was breathing with the night. When the data came in from the pair array, it was cleaner. The raw stream looked like fresh snow. They ran the same filters, then a few new ones inspired by the first hint. They looked for sidebands, small mirror signals that sometimes flank a main one when a carrier is modulated. Nothing stood tall. They checked for polarization flips, which can tell you if a signal is twisted by a magnetic field. Nothing clear. But there it was again, a motion match, a path that lined up with the skies turning better than it had any right to if it were random. No one in the room called it proof. Proof is a hard word here. Proof needs time, and time needs patience. They only said, "This is interesting," and marked it with a quiet star in the log. They marked it not because it shouted, but because it kept its shape when everything else was stripped away. They set up one more trial listening when the source slid low on the horizon, where Earth's own air thickens and bends the view. If the motion curve was a trick, the bend would break it. If it was real, the curve would absorb the bend and still hum the same quiet tune. The air cooled toward dawn. Someone adjusted a blanket around their shoulders. Someone else sipped coffee gone stale. You, listening now, might feel the steady thrum of the racks and the clean click of keys, the way a mind leans forward when it is tired but pulled by wonder. The room did not chase drama. It respected the small. It understood that awe can be a dim signal that survives only by being noticed. And so the chapter rests here, in that careful place, between a band that stayed blank and a path that kept returning, between the fear that silence is empty and the possibility that silence is a chosen cloak. The dishes hold their pose. The spectrographs wait with their thin rainbows ready. The arrays sit like sleeping giants, every cable a vein, every clock a heartbeat. Beyond the walls, the night stretches, timeless and fragile. In the soft glow, the monitors dim, the plots settle, and the whisper, if it is a whisper, moves with the sky small and sure, as if to say nothing and yet say everything. The glow fades toward the horizon, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. The night is quiet enough to hear the soft turning of the earth. Observatories sit like sleeping ships on a dark ocean, their domes half open to the cool sky. A single orbit threads through that sky, an ancient traveler crossing the same lanes again and again. Its path seems simple at first, an ellipse pulled by gravity, a comet's steady line, a clock that never learns a new trick. But patient eyes watch, and patience brings a different kind of light. Under the gentle hum of cooling fans and the slow blink of status lights, the orbit lays down a faint trail of questions. Data scientists move gently through this trail. They work in whispers so as not to disturb their own thinking. On screens, the trajectory becomes a curve. The curve becomes a set of numbers, and the numbers bloom into color. Blues for time, golds for distance, soft gray for doubt. They test simple ideas first, like brushstrokes across endless night. What if the intervals between close approaches fall into a rhythm? What if certain angles prefer each other? If the orbit were music, what notes would it like to play? Prime numbers arrive like careful guests. The team builds a lattice of prime intervals, 2, 3, 5, 7, and slides it across the timeline of the orbit. They do not expect much. Nature is messy. Gravity is not a watchmaker who favors special numbers. But the primes refuse to leave. Every few passes, a close match appears, never exact, never showy, just close enough to tug at a quiet part of the mind. They record it. Then they test again, shuffling the lattice, trying other seeds. Probability is weighed like flour on a scale. They look for overfitting. They look for illusion. Geometry follows, warm like a lamp in winter. Ratios from simple shapes, triangles, pentagons, spirals, are pressed against the curve. The orbit accepts some, rejects others. When a ratio lands, it feels like a compass tracing a circle you can almost see. Distances between certain points echo the old constants that guide builders and composers. Not a loud echo, a faint one, as if the universe were mindful not to wake the sleepers below. The team notes the matches, then turns to what matters most: significance. They run shuffle tests. They let the computer make thousands of fake orbits with the same energy and tilt. They slide the same templates across those pretend skies. Most give nothing. A few whisper back. Their curve whispers more. The difference is small, but small is where the cosmos often lives, inside the grain of a meteor, the tilt of a photon, the pause between pulses from a distant star. They document with care. They say correlation, not cause. They say confidence intervals. They say we do not know, not yet. Outside, the telescopes adjust as if nodding. Inside, the room holds breath. A new set of tests begins. Star maps are folded into the curve like paper boats into water. If the orbit were speaking, perhaps the speech uses the sky itself as letters. The team rotates old constellations across time, checking if crossings line up with known beacons, pulsars, bright nebulae, ancient supernova shells that still write their names in dust. The alignments are not graceful, but there are too many near misses to ignore. You would not bet your life on them. You would not claim a miracle. You would simply admit that something is leaning toward order. The phrase forbidden pattern lands, careful and hushed. Forbidden not by law, but by expectation. Not by rule, but by what random chance usually allows. Too much order is a kind of rumor. It asks for restraint. So the team uses modest language, a soft tone for a soft signal. Their spectrographs wait. Their code waits. The orbit keeps moving through its cradle of silence. From time to time, someone looks up from a monitor and out through the glass. Starlight seems to answer with a neutral face. If you were here, you would feel the rhythm before you understood it. The curve on the screen looks like a brushstroke laid down by a steady hand. The pattern does not shout. It taps the table twice and stops. You lean in. You ask for more. In that leaning, a thought returns. Perhaps the pattern is a reply to our gaze. The telescopes are a key, and the orbit is a lock. Turn the key one way, nothing. Turn it the other, something clicks, quiet as frost. They test for bias. Did they pick the intervals to fit their hope? They scramble the entire system. They let the machine choose the templates at random, then compare. The forbidden trace fades in the fake data, returns in the real. Again, the difference is small. Again, it persists. The graphs, once noisy, now carry the gentle balance of waves in a protected bay. You could fall asleep to their rise and fall. You might, if your bed were set among these screens and the slow-turning domes. The orbit's light, captured by telescope, slips into the spectrograph like a whisper down a long hallway. The spectrum shows the usual marks: ice, dust, a hint of complex carbon. The same cosmic recipe that feeds comets and the growth of worlds. Nothing here spells out a message. Nothing here proves a mind. Yet paired with the timing and the geometry, a new feeling grows hope with careful shoes. Even the most skeptical voice admits the data are curious. Curious is science for a raised eyebrow you cannot yet justify. Numbers meet stories in the half-lit zone where sleep begins. Imagine the orbit as a gentle compass tracing patterns you do not recognize until the second or third pass. Imagine prime intervals as stepping stones across a stream of time. Imagine a star map folded, not to cover the sky, but to touch the curve at certain points, like fingertips tapping a door. The door does not open, but the tapping is there, like rain. Not a storm, just a steady hint of weather. The team, cautious and calm, writes their report. It reads like a lullaby of honesty. They state methods. They share code. They stack probabilities like smooth stones. They ask colleagues to look for hidden traps, detector drift, selection bias, the long fingers of tides from unseen planets or a distant passing star. They invite disagreement. They request patience. Sometimes the best gift a field can give is a slow breath before any claim learns to run. Outside, dawn skims the horizon, a silver line that turns the observatory roofs into soft islands. The night's data settle into storage, a deep blue lake of numbers. A few scientists close their eyes in their chairs, the glow of monitors painting their faces in gentle tones. The orbit will complete another loop. The tests will repeat in different hands under different skies. No one owns a pattern. It is either there for everyone or belongs to no one at all. You find yourself imagining what kind of reply would use gravity instead of voice. A messenger that knows you will watch. Might speak in timing and ratios, in the quiet grammar that telescopes can hear. It would not be a shout across the void. It would be a nudge. A brush of starlight against a sensor at the right moment. A repeated kindness. A signal shy enough to survive doubt. If such a reply exists, it would ask a soft question back. What is the shape of your attention? Tonight, attention is a lens. It holds still. It listens. The forbidden pattern peeks out again, like a faint echo from a canyon you walked through days ago. It does not grow stronger. It grows steadier. In sleep-friendly words, the orbit feels like a lock that turns when you breathe at the right pace. The feeling is fragile. It could fail with the next data set. It could sharpen with the one after. Wonder sits with both outcomes and does not hurry either one. The sky cools to a deeper blue. The first birds test their own intervals. 2 notes, then 3. A colleague takes a breath and whispers, "If this is a reply, what did we ask?" The room answers with the hum of fans and the soft tapping of keys. Perhaps the question was never spoken. Perhaps our instruments asked it for us when we lined them up and pointed them toward the drifting shadow of an ancient traveler. We asked by watching well. The orbit continues, calm as a heartbeat. Somewhere behind it, beyond it, beside it, the great engines of the galaxy turn. Pulsars sweep their beams like lighthouses. Nebulae hold their infant stars under a gentle veil. Exoplanets tug on starlight, shaping the smallest waver. Everything is motion. Everything is pattern. Only a few are forbidden, too ordered to ignore, too quiet to claim. In that narrow place between chance and design, all finds a seat and closes its eyes. For now, the language stays modest. Correlation tested. Probability weighed. The compass line held steady against the sky. The pattern does not promise meaning, yet it feels like meaning's shadow, moving in step with us. As the observatory doors slide shut and night folds into day, The curve on the screen fades to a memory of careful lines. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The camera opens on a soft glow, Earth turning in the dark like a slow breath. Oceans catching moonlight, continents rimmed in a thin blue line. A quiet score hums, the kind that feels like a distant choir and wind over snow. In this calm, the film offers a translation not of words, but of alignment. Earth, sun, and a far star drifting toward one brief, graceful chord. A turning becomes a reply, or seems to. The message is not a sentence. It is a position in space, held for a heartbeat, like a bow made in the universal language of motion. They have been waiting for this moment. Instruments prepared. Telescopes tuned. Telescopes on Earth and above it. Mirrors cool. Sensors dark adapted. Spectrographs ready to record the faintest changes in starlight. The team has learned from comets and exoplanets, from the way orbits whisper their rules. Every movement is a clue, every pause a possibility. When the alignment begins, it is slow as fog. When it peaks, it is quick as a blink. In that blink, the sun, the Earth, and the distant star share a line, like beads on a string stretched across the solar wind. Orbital mechanics guide the moment. The narrator's voice is soft, patient. An orbit is a promise kept by gravity. Planets keep those promises again and again. The angles are measured, the period known, the curve of paths plotted long before the meeting. But there is another force in the scene, the solar wind. The constant breath of charged particles from the sun. It presses on dust. It tugs on tails. It shapes any thin cloud into a streamer that points away from light. That pressure, too, is part of the timing, a gentle hand that can shift an object by the smallest touch. Build these pieces together, and the film's translation takes shape, a dance that isn't random, a gesture that holds. The camera glides through a diagram that looks simple, almost childlike. 3 circles, 1 line. But the line is alive. It moves from day to day, hour to hour, as Earth advances in its track. There are narrow observational windows when the sun is far enough below the horizon for telescopes to see, but not so far that the line is lost. Observatories watch the limb of twilight, the place where night meets day and stars wake up one by one. In this borderland, the distant star brightens and dims by a hair's width measured in parts per thousand. Data gathers like frost on glass. A voice reminds us. Discovery has always been a measured patience. Astronomers check the dome's dew point and the spectrograph's calibration. They warmed the electronics. They waited for the wind to drop below a certain number, for the seeing to steady. They checked the spectrograph again. These were small rituals, practiced across years, done not for drama, but for quiet certainty. When the turn came, when the exact alignment crossed the night side of Earth for the first time that the instruments could truly measure it, it felt like a nod from across an ocean of dark. Not loud, not obvious. A hello through a veil. The film never declares it as proof. It speaks in careful steps, just as the team worked. First, the model. Orbital mechanics predicted the line. Second, the environment. Solar wind pressure and magnetic fields that can nudge thin structures and faint tails, making a delicate signal drift by minutes, sometimes by hours. Third, the window. Will the atmosphere cooperate? Will the data be clean? Will the human hours match the cosmic ones? Finally, the record. A light curve, a tiny kink in starlight, a polarization shift. The trace of something thin and purposeful crossing a beam that traveled years to reach us. Science and story walk hand in hand here. The story gives shape to hope. The science keeps it humble. The narrator shows us the graph with its tiny dip, then fades to the telescope room. A ring of monitors, blue and gray, a red light glowing above the door. Someone writes the time in a logbook. Someone else counts seconds under their breath. Later, the data will be cleaned, the spikes cleared, the noise modeled. But in the moment, the room is very quiet. You can almost hear the fans. You can hear your own breath. On the screen, the star returns to its steady brightness. Nothing dramatic follows. No flare, no repeating pulse. Only the normal shimmer of air and the calm march of photons from something unimaginably far away. And yet, the team looks at one another. The small dip came at the very best moment within the narrowest band when the alignment was perfect. If this is a reply, it says, "We see you seeing us." If it is only nature, it is nature at her most poetic, a coincidence that feels like a smile. The film is careful with the word coincidence. Coincidences happen. The cosmos is large. When you look at enough stars through enough nights, you will find patterns that bloom and fade by chance. But the heart still leans forward. It is human to listen for a whisper behind the wind. The documentary honors that feeling without letting it lead the facts. The voiceover says, "We hold both ideas at once, wonder and caution." The footage shows a slow pan over the telescope's dome, white against the black. The dome looks like an eye, and inside it, the mirror is a lake. Solar wind pressure returns as a character in this chapter. The animation becomes almost tactile. Particles stream from the sun, lines of field curling like threads, dust grains turning, tails forming and pointing away. A slender structure moving through that wind will behave like a weather vane. Its orientation will change, its path will weave, and its shadow, cast across the beam of a star, will be a faint shifting thing. Timing it is hard. Predicting it is harder. But there is a sweetness to the challenge. It means that to listen to such a messenger, you must know the wind between worlds. The film then shifts to observational windows, a phrase that sounds prosaic and turns out to be full of romance. There are windows set by seasons, by the tilt of Earth, by the geometry of glare and the limits of dawn. There are windows set by human schedules, when people can stay awake, when a second sight can take over, when the weather map offers a slim chance above the mountains. Each open window is a promise to watch, to be present if the universe chooses that moment to pass by. In this way, patience becomes a form of love. We are reminded of old discoveries that began the same way. A tiny signal, a careful team, a long wait for confirmation. The first exoplanets were shadows too, regular dips in starlight that meant worlds crossing their suns. The first fast radio bursts were spikes that burst once and were gone, their origins argued over for years. The narrator speaks in past tense for these, honoring the work that carried us here. Those stories give context. They say, if this is real, time will tell. If it is not, time will tell that too. Either way, the method holds. A gentle escalation follows. The film adds layers of possibility without rushing. In a simulation, the alignment repeats decades from now, when Earth and the distant star will again share a line. The predicted window, future and narrow, glides across a calendar like a shadow over water. The team imagines instruments that could then be ready. Bigger mirrors, faster detectors, more sensitive polarization measurements. The future tense opens like a door just ajar. Could the next messenger carry a clearer signal? Or, if there really is intent behind the moment, do they trust us to learn from silence first? The question is left floating, and the soundtrack gives it room. Silence is not empty here. It is full of drift and faint noise, of cosmic rays ticking, of voltage hum, of the soft turning of a motor. The film invites you to experience this silence the way the team did, patiently, kindly, with your eyes open. It offers second-person immersion for a breath. You stand by the console. You check the clock. You feel the chill of the dome as night air slides in. You look up through the slit, and there it is. The star, steady, ancient, holding its light like a kept promise. As the alignment falls away, the narration returns to the heart. Awe is not proof, it says, but it is a sign that we are paying attention. Hope is fragile by design. It keeps us from closing the book too soon. The team looks at their data and marks the uncertainty. They circle the moment on a plot. They write careful words in a report. Nothing in the film shouts. The reply, if it exists, is a hand raised in a far crowd. We wave back, not to claim we know, but to show we are here. In the final minutes, the imagery grows wider. The orbit of Earth becomes a bright ring. The sun is a coin of fire. The distant star is a pinprick in a painted sky. Between them stretches a cradle of silence filled with solar wind and dust, with dark and cold and the hidden traffic of ancient travelers' comets. Particles, perhaps messengers we have not yet learned to name. The film does not call them ships or signals. It calls them possibilities. It says the universe is still writing, and we are learning how to read. One last scene. The telescope dome closes like a careful eyelid. The monitors dim. Someone covers the spectrograph with a soft cloth. Someone else steps outside into the thin, clean air and looks east where the first gray is rising. The line of alignment has passed. The world keeps moving. Behind the person, the building hums as it cools, metal ticking as it gives back the day's heat. In front of them, the horizon grows pale. They feel both full and empty, like after a long story told by a friend who had to leave before the end. The narrator leaves us with an image instead of an answer. 3 bodies in a brief, perfect line, and the feeling of being noticed. Maybe the film is right, and a turn became a reply. Maybe it was only the elegance of physics meeting the readiness of our eyes. Either way, the lesson holds. When the sky offers a moment, we meet it with care. We learn the orbit, we measure the wind, we open the window, and we listen without forcing the sound. The glow fades into daylight, and with it the room's noises settle into quiet. But in that drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. A soft glow sits on the horizon. The hour when observatories hum like sleepers who half dream and half listen. Above them, the sky stretches wide, a gentle veil threaded with starlight. Tonight, the work is simple in idea and large in scale. Build a net. Not a rope and not net, but a patient, careful web of eyes and ears. The plan sounds calm, almost plain. More wide-field telescopes, faster alerts, better spectrographs, coordinated antennas. Yet in this quiet plan sits a bold promise. The next time an unknown traveler drifts by, the net will feel the touch. Wide-field telescopes are the net's first threads. Each one takes a picture not of a single star, but of huge slices of sky, like a sweeping panorama made in seconds. They do not stare, they scan. They move, snap, move again, mapping constellations and drifting shadows. The new mirrors are light but strong, the sensors crisp and cool. Every night, they create a fresh atlas. Every morning, the atlas is compared to the one before. What was here? What moved? What brightened or dimmed? The answers appear as tiny dots with tiny numbers, but the story they tell is large. Software sits next in line, quiet and sure. It does not look for beauty. It looks for change. An algorithm flags an anomaly, a dot that shifts just so, a comet tail that thickens, a faint streak that shows acceleration. It draws boxes, soars odds, and pushes a ping to a waiting queue. The code is simple to describe. Subtract last night from tonight. Watch what remains, but smart under the hood. It knows how the atmosphere trembles. It knows the heartbeat of a satellite's path. It learns how dust dances across glass. When something breaks the pattern, the alert runs. Faster. Save the teams, and the net tightens. Faster alerts mean less time between a whisper in the data and a human hand on a telescope's controls. A new alert system slices delay from minutes to seconds. A message hops across servers, across oceans, from a mountaintop to a laptop to a dome that is already opening to the night. The motor whirs. The tube tilts. The camera cools. Somewhere it is midnight. Somewhere it is dawn. Somewhere a student rubs their eyes and smiles. They have trained for this quiet rush, the sleepy race that still feels like a dream. Spectrographs add color to the net, the way a prism turns white light into a secret code. The thin rainbow they make is not for art. It is for chemistry and motion. A line shifts left, and the object moves away. A line shifts right, and it comes near. Sodium hums in one place. Carbon sighs in another. With a better spectrograph, faint lines rise from the noise. The traveler's breath becomes readable. Dust or ice, fast or slow, heated by the sun or cooled by the dark. In the old days, a spectrum might arrive after a long wait. Now it comes in near real time, a heartbeat after the alert. At radio wavelengths, antennas listen where light cannot speak. A single dish hears a broad swath of sky. Many dishes, spread wide and linked by time, hear with sharp focus. They act like one giant ear. Coordinated antennas catch whispers from particles and plasma, from a tail swept by solar wind, from a shock front where dust meets heat. Scientists call this very long baseline work. To the rest of us, it is a set of stations keeping time together, like musicians across continents playing the same note. The net is not only eyes. It is also ears, tuned to a murmur as old as comets. All of this, taken together, is an early warning network. It does not grip the sky. It cradles it. It is built to notice a faint change at the edge of vision and send a gentle shout across the world. The plan is not flashy. It is patient. Survey, compare, alert, follow up, confirm. A panorama stitches itself from thousands of frames. Software sifts. Telescopes pivot. Antennas align. The people behind them move with quiet rhythm. This is how a comet becomes a story, and a story becomes a map, and a map becomes a guide for the next traveler who will surely come. In the control rooms, lights stay low. Coffee cools. A log fills line by line. Coordinates, timestamps, exposure length, seeing conditions. A team in one time zone sends a note to a team in another. Possible turn at 3:14 check. The word turn hangs there. Was it just a trick of glare, a gust of solar wind, a bias in the data? Or did the traveler make a move like a secret handshake? The mystery remains a warm ember. Science does not leap to answers. It leans closer to the glow and listens. Training makes this leaning possible. New watchers learn what to check first. Meteor trails, because Earth's sky is full of quick sparks that pretend to be more. Satellite flares, because metal can mimic a comet's flash. Solar wind shifts, because the sun breathes and pushes tails to sway. Perihelion arcs, because paths bend in the inner system as if drawn by invisible string. A checklist sits by every station. Look for repeating trails. Cross-check with meteor cameras. Pull space weather updates. Plot the curve near the sun and see if the numbers sing the same tune. The steps feel small. Together, they are sturdy. Meteor networks help with the first filter. Small cameras, pointed up from many towns, record the bright streaks of sand-sized stone. Their systems mark the time to the thousandth of a second. When the early warning net pings, these smaller eyes confirm if a trail passed through the same patch of sky at the same moment. If yes, the alert cools. If no, it rises. Solar wind monitors, silent spacecraft sitting between Earth and the Sun, add their own numbers. Speed, density, magnetic field. If the wind surged, a comet's tail could have turned without any mind or mystery. If the wind was calm, the question lingers. Perihelion arcs come last in this quick dance. They are the curved paths objects take as they skim the sun and swing back out. Old equations trace those curves like chalk marks on a board. If the traveler follows the chalk, then nature plays by the rules it wrote long ago. If the traveler slips the chalk by a little or sits off the line for a beat, a red flag goes up. The net does not rush to meaning. It records the strangeness and asks for more eyes. More telescopes turn. Another spectrograph takes a breath of the light. Another antenna checks the noise. Latency, the time between the sky's change and the network's reply, is the enemy the teams can actually wrestle. So they trin it. They cache star catalogs near the cameras so subtraction runs fast. They stream data to the cloud in small pieces, not giant blocks. They keep hot spares of servers in case a storm knocks one down. When a site goes offline, another site takes the load, the way a flock slips and closes ranks. Some parts run on scheduled scripts. Some parts wake when the sky whispers. The blend is simple on the outside, well-tuned within. Small observatories and citizen scientists hold key knots in the net. A backyard telescope with a steady mount can chase an object minutes after a major survey reports it. A retired teacher in one country and a college student in another both send photometry measurements of brightness that catch a subtle flare before dawn. Forums and mailing lists look old-fashioned, but they carry gold. A single clear frame from a farm field can confirm a path, lock in a period, or dismiss a false alarm. The net is strongest when it welcomes many hands, many skies. Memory matters too. The net keeps a history, not just a snapshot. It remembers how often an odd flare visited a certain region. It stores the fingerprints of known satellites, of booster parts, of old mission debris that still shines. It logs the time when a nebula's edge wavered in seeing, and the night a lens grew cold too quickly. This memory, simple and clean, keeps the network from chasing ghosts. It also makes it brave when something truly new appears, because the past sits close and can be checked with a glance. Some nights the net catches a messenger that is only a rock, cold and ordinary. The team still smiles. A clean catch proves the method. Other nights there is a harbinger feel, a drift that does not match the book. The alert stays hot. The follow-up climbs. The spectrum loads. A line appears where none was expected. Discussions turn soft and exact. Numbers first, feelings later. Wonder is allowed, but only after the work is done. This calm order, repeated again and again, builds trust in the net and in each other. In this plan there is hope, and it is practical. The goal is not to own the sky. It is to be ready for it. The dream is to catch the next cosmic whisper in real time, to hold it long enough to learn, and to let it go with grace. No one system will do this alone. Eyes, ears, software, and people must move as one. The net is not a fortress. It is a hammock, a cradle stretched across mountaintops and rooftops, across deserts and ice, across oceans that reflect the moon. There will be nights when clouds win, when power fails, when the alert pings to an empty chair. Plans exist, even for those nights. A site farther west takes over. A script retries. A message rings a phone on a knit stand. Someone wakes, pads to the desk, and looks. The traveler does not wait for perfect conditions. The net learns to work with the world as it is. Slow is steady. Steady is quick. Tired eyes still see, because they are trained to notice the one bright pixel that does not belong. And if, once again, a path bends in a way that feels like intent, like a turn made not by pressure but by choice, the network will be ready to ask the right next questions. It will use simple language to share complex care. It will mark the time, record the light, listen to the hiss, and keep the mystery warm without letting it run wild. The people who built this net did so with wonder, with awe, and with a gentle kind of courage. They know the sky is both fragile and timeless. They know that listening is its own kind of answer. So the watchers breathe, and the net holds, and the sky drifts on. The ancient traveler is gone now, a memory set in graphs and quiet notes. Yet the web remains, threaded and sure, stitched by hands that trust in small steps. Another messenger waits somewhere beyond the glow, turning in a way no one has yet seen. When it comes, the net will feel it soft as a fingertip on a still pond, and in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. The night hangs like a gentle veil over the world, and the radio dishes stare upward, still as sleeping lakes. Starlight slides along their edges and gathers in their bowls. Somewhere beyond, an ancient traveler, maybe a comet, maybe a thought crosses the dark. If the term was a message, do we owe a reply? The question floats in the air, the towers breathe, a soft, steady hum under the wind. Humanity stands at the edge of a vast temple. Every star is a quiet lantern. The silence does not feel empty. It feels careful, like a cradle. Inside it, our own breath sounds loud. Inside it, ethics begins. The scientists who listen SETI teams, students, retired engineers who still dream sit before spectrographs and screens. They learned patience long ago. A telescope hears nothing for years, and then hears a burst. A burst becomes a trace, and the trace becomes a possibility. In the past, many possibilities faded into the background, folded back into the ordinary. False alarms taught caution. A satellite masqueraded as a messenger. A rotating antenna drew a line that looked like destiny and turned out to be a loose cable. They remember these lessons. They remember that wonder is not a proof. It is an invitation to look closer. So they listen. They catalog anomalies. They remove the Earth from the equation aircraft, radar, orbiting hardware, even the warm noise of our own phones. They cross-check telescopes and time zones. If one dish hears something, another turns to the same coordinates. The sky offers no speeches, only whispers smeared across frequencies. A signal with no clear origin is a thin thread. It can snap with a tug. Everyone moves gently, because haste has ruined many bright mornings in science. The ethic of listening grows from this. Respect the unknown by not rushing to define it. But listening leads to another question. If there is a whisper, should we whisper back? This is where the room changes. The debate shifts from ear to mouth, from SETI search for extraterrestrial intelligence to Medi-Mester terrestrial intelligence. It is a pivot from caution to declaration. Some argue that we already speak. Our radio and television bleed across the local bubble. Our radar paints the moon and skips away like thrown stones. To them, sending a deliberate message is not a leap. It is a clear note among the static. Others see a different risk. A deliberate message has a trajectory. It has an author. It has a return address. In that pause, fear takes a careful seat next to hope. Humanity knows stories. A beacon can be a welcome fire, or it can be a flare that guides unwanted attention. The past holds warnings written in tides and sails. On Earth, when distant cultures first made contact, the stronger often pressed upon the weaker. Some say the cosmos is not a courtroom, but they ask, what if it rhymes? They do not predict invaders emerging from a nebula like harbingers. They simply note we do not know the ethics of strangers, or their needs, or their hunger, or their patience. Silence, they say, is a fortress we should enter softly. Others answer that fear should not write our future. They point to the long arc of curiosity that shaped us. The first astronomers tracked the sky with stones and shadows. The first radio astronomers heard the hiss of the Milky Way and wondered what else the spectrum might hold. Risk and discovery have always been siblings. To step is to accept that ground may shift. If we find neighbors someday, they may be gentle. They may be far past war, past need. They may be listeners like us, wrapped in their own night, hoping not to be alone. A message, sent with care, could be a hand extended across an ocean of vacuum. Between these poles lies the fragile line between wonder and worry. It is not a fixed border. It moves with new data, with new models of exoplanets and their atmospheres, with the measured quiet around certain stars. It moves with each cometary visitor whose trajectory reminds us that the solar system has its own slow traffic. It moves when a telescope detects a narrowband tone and the lab goes still, and people feel their heartbeats like small drums. Good ethics keeps pace with facts. It is humble. It says, measure again. Expand the sample. Separate signal from shadow. And then it asks the human question. If something looks back, what kind of guest do we wish to be? A patient science suggests a path. Listen longer. Share data across borders. Replicate detections with instruments on different continents, under different skies. Keep archives open so others can comb through the drift and the sleep of signals. Imagine consent at planetary scale. If we ever craft words to send, they should not belong to one nation, one lab, one era. Who speaks for Earth? Perhaps no one alone. Perhaps a committee of many, revising over years. Guided by the calm math of orbits and the soft language of art. A simple message. Tuned to universal's prime numbers, hydrogen's fingerprint. The geometry of a circle can travel without presuming too much. It can be a greeting rather than a claim. There is also the matter of what not to say. But there is aught to say. Ethics is not only speech. It is silence and the choosing of it. We do not share coordinates of our homes with strangers at night. We do not send maps to our most fragile places. The biosphere is not a detail. It is our only harbor. Some propose a code. Any message should be vetted, slow, transparent, and reversible. If a warning becomes clear a sign that a star field hosts a danger, or that a frequency is not ours to use, we stop. Like sailors who learn the local winds before crossing a strait, we accept that the cosmos has rules we do not yet know. Even the idea of a reply reaches into philosophy. Do we owe it? To whom? If the turn was a message, perhaps the message was not for us. Perhaps we are overhearing a conversation between distant minds, spread across an old network of paused beacons and sleeping archives. Or perhaps the message is not intentional, only the natural pulse of something vast, like a lighthouse whose beam sweeps and sweeps without caring who watches from the rocks. To reply is to enter a story. A story has consequences. The ethic here is gentle. Understand the genre before you add your line. So we hold in our hands both a transmitter and a quiet hour. The dish waits under the steady drift of the constellations. Orion rises. A nebula shines like a pale cloud cradling newborn stars. Far beyond, exoplanets orbit suns with names we learned yesterday. The spectrograph draws a thin river of light, and we study its bends. We accept that fear can be wise without letting it be king. We accept that hope can be strong without becoming reckless. The night feels like a temple, and we remove our metaphorical shoes. We act as caretakers in a place we did not build. If we whisper back one day, what should we say? Perhaps we begin with listening made visible. This is who we are when we pay attention. We map a timeline of discovery, honest about eras that became stepping stones. We show how we learned from comets that time is long, from eclipses that shadows tell the truth, from radio that the void has texture. We include music and prime numbers, a child's laugh turned into a wave, a sketch of the double helix next to a recipe for clean water. We say that we have known war but also mercy. We have made mistakes and learned forgiveness. We say we are still becoming. And when the message ends, we leave a pause room for another voice. This is part of the ethic too. to speak modestly, to recognize that a fortress of silence may be a nursery, and nurseries demand quiet. The patient science of listening will continue either way. Dishes will tilt. Software will sift. People will sip late coffee and watch the bands for a narrow, unexplained tone. They will cross-reference the sun's activity, the dance of satellites, the angle of antennas, the pulse of distant pulsars that keep better time than any clock we have made. They will move carefully, because the stakes are not only scientific, they are human. The cradle of silence does not rock by itself. Our choices rock it. Each vote for caution, each argument for outreach, each night of careful observation is a small hand on its edge. Destiny is not a voice from the sky. It is the sum of these hands. If the universe is crowded with listeners, then listening is already a kind of reply. If it is sparse, then our restraint is also a kind of respect. Either way, the ethic holds. Be slow to shout across a canyon you have not measured. Be ready to share a map when the bridge appears. In the end, the dishes keep their watch, and the sky keeps its distance. The glow along the horizon fades, and with it the day's noise. The question remains, soft as breath on glass. If the term was a message, what do we owe it? A patient ear, a careful heart, a promise that curiosity and safety can share the same orbit. The signal, if it comes, will meet us there, at that quiet point where wonder steadies fear. And the silence deepens. Yet hidden in that silence is something waiting to be understood. The night opens like a slow curtain. A soft glow hangs over the valley, and high above, an ancient traveler crosses the dark. No trumpets, no blaze, just a quiet line along a patient orbit, trimmed by starlight and the faint haze of distant dust. People lean back in their chairs or lie in bed with their headphones on and listen as telescopes blink and breathe. The sky is gentle tonight. The story is calm. The mystery is awake. For those who wish for simple answers, there is comfort in the familiar. A comet is a snow and dust wanderer. Warm it, and it sighs. It releases gas. The release can push, just a little, like a hand on a small boat. That push can bend a path, can alter a trajectory in ways that gravity alone cannot. When astronomers speak of outgassing, they do not picture a storm. They picture tiny jets, whisper-thin plumes, slipping from the surface where the sun's light has warmed the skin. Under the telescope, such a visitor should show a halo, a veil, a brief tail. That is the simple picture. That is the comfort. But nature is broad and sometimes shy. One natural model says, maybe the surface was wrapped in a dust mantle grains, baked together after long ages, forming a crust that kept gas trapped. Such a crust would hide the size. It would smother the soft glow, turning the outgassing into a secret pressure beneath the skin. The push would still be there, but the plume would be missing. Like a breath behind a scarf, warm and real, but unseen. Another natural model lifts a different lantern. Imagine icy fragments, not solid blocks, not clean spheres, but broken, porous clumps, like frost caught in a spider's web. They would be light for their size, almost feathery. Sunlight would move them more easily, the way wind moves dry leaves. With a high area and little mass, they could feel the gentle nudge of radiation pressure, the steady stream of light itself. It sounds grand, but the idea is simple. Light carries a push. The same way you feel the warmth on your face, the fragment feels a tiny shove on its surface. Over days and weeks, that shove adds up, changing the path with a subtle, graceful curve. Some suggest a thin shell, almost like the rind of a comet, hollowed by long travel. From a distance, it would look solid. Up close, it would be delicate, like a blown egg. Such a shell would be easy for sunlight to push. It could also spin as it moved, like a slow pinwheel, with the spin guiding where the push actually goes. If you imagine placing a dry leaf on a still pond and then tapping the water with one finger, you can see how the leaf can drift in a way that a stone never could. Light is that finger. The shell is that leaf. In their notebooks, astronomers list more ideas. Dust mantles that crack and seal again. Pockets of gas that vent only when the object turns one warm face to the sun. Thermal lag heat seeped in, then released later, so jets fire when the sunlight has already moved on. Chemicals that do not shine the way water does, so a spectrograph would miss them while a push remains. One model sketches a shard from a supernova's debris brittle, fluffy, a kind of cosmic ash that light can carry. Another imagines an icy slab, smoothed by time, with a face as bright as fresh snow and a back as dark as coal, creating uneven warmth and a soft rocket effect. Each model handles a piece of the puzzle. Some make the path make sense. Others explain the silence of the halo. A few suggest how the spin might wobble, then settle. None gather every thread. Listeners drift with these possibilities like leaves on a quiet stream. The voice is steady, the analogies are simple, and the edges are soft enough to sleep on. To understand the push of light, it helps to picture a sunflower field. Each head turns to the sun, not because wind moves it, but because light brings energy. In space, light brings a tiny pressure. Over millions of miles, tiny becomes mighty. Take a fragment as light as ash and as wide as a book, and sunlight can guide it as surely as a gentle hand. The spacecraft of the early dreams, the solar sail ships from old sketches, were built on the same idea. The universe is generous with photons. Now, trace the path. A path in space is a conversation between gravity and everything else. Gravity says, "Come this way." Heat says, "Not exactly." Outgassing says, "A little to the side." Radiation pressure says, "And drift, just so." Add these whispers together, and the trajectory bends into the shape we see. The math lives in dense symbols, but the feeling is no more mysterious than a kite's dance when the wind shifts. The kite string is the sun's pull. The wind is light and warmth. The tug of the hand is time. Why, then, does the comfort not come? Because the sky gave us a pattern that felt forbidden, half-remembered, like a melody heard in a dream. If it were just a comet, why so little mist? If it were just a rock, why the gentle shove without the usual glitter? If it were a shard of dust, why did it hold together as it turned? Listeners lie in the dark, hearing the turn of a page, the quiet breath of the narrator, and they can sense the scientist pausing, erasing lines, redrawing them softer, trying another shade. The dust mantle model is careful. It says the outgassing was there but hidden. Yet, many eyes looked for the common signs and did not see them. The shell model is graceful. It explains the push, but it asks for an object so thin and fragile that its journey across cold space feels like a miracle. The supernova shard model is bold. It wraps the object in the story of a distant star's death. Shards wandering from a nebula long faded, but it must answer how such ash survives long travel. How it dodges every turbulence. How it holds the shape that light can steer. When the spectrograph studied the faint light, it brought back puzzles. Little or no obvious water trace. Maybe hints of more exotic breath. Maybe none at all. This is where the language turns gentle. Instead of declaring, the scientists suggest. Instead of closing the book, they widen the margins. Humility walks in like night air through an open window. The voice says, some models fit pieces. None fit all. And in that sentence, there is both rest and wonder. There is also the human wish for order. We like to think of the exoplanet systems we map, the rings we sketch around distant giants, the clean arcs in a textbook. But the sky, like an old sea, keeps a few currents hidden under the surface. Sometimes the traveler is a comet that forgets its tail. Sometimes it is a shard that acts like foam. Sometimes it is both and neither. The universe is allowed to be messy because it is real. And real things carry scars and quirks and long, quiet histories. The story slows. The music lowers to a single note, almost a hum. The ancient traveler continues, fading into distance. In bed, a listener feels the last edge of waking slip away and tries to hold the image of a thin shell turning in the sunlight. A dust mantle that breathes without smoke, a fragment that floats on light like a paper boat on a deep lake. If the sky will not give a verdict, can meaning still live in the space between? The question is not a wall. It is a door. It asks us to consider that mystery is not failure. Mystery is an invitation. Think of the times people looked up and named a shape in the dark. A hunter, a swan, a river of stars. Those names did not change what the stars were, but they changed how people felt under them. In the same way, our natural models are names for how a traveler might move. Each name is a lantern. Each lantern throws a different pattern on the path. Walk with them and the trail feels less lonely. If you were to stand on a hill and watch until dawn, you might catch the hint of a path that looks almost ordinary, and then see it curl in a way that feels like a whisper from a messenger. The mind tries to match it to a pattern on a shelf. Comet, asteroid, shard, shell. Somewhere a child asks, could it be new? And somewhere a scientist answers, it could be rare. Rare is natural too. Between those sentences lies the tender space where knowledge grows. So the chapter rests in a calm truth. Nature has many costumes. Some are simple, some are strange, some are both at once. Radiation pressure is not magic. It is sunlight taking its time. Outgassing is not a storm. It is breath behind a veil. A dust mantle is not a wall. It is a blanket that remembers cold and remembers heat. A shard from ancient debris is not a miracle. It is a survivor from a long-ago fire. Put them together, and you have a sky that can move a traveler without leaving fingerprints we easily see. The viewer, the listener, the dreamer each closes their eyes and keeps a picture. A gentle arc, a silent push, a thin shell spinning like a slow wind chime in a cradle of silence. The forbidden pattern remains, half remembered, like a tune hummed at the edge of sleep. The voices of science are soft, and their care is a comfort. Somewhere far from here, the traveler glides through another field of faint light, and instruments cool and wait. The glow fades into the horizon, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. A night breeze moves through open windows, and the world becomes a quiet listening room. Streetlights blur into a soft glow, and radios hum in kitchens and beside beds. In the sky, the ancient traveler grows smaller, a drifting shadow slipping beyond familiar constellations. People don't chase it now. They stand still. They breathe. They listen. Somewhere between the tick of a clock and the hush of distant traffic, a feeling rises. The planet is awake and it wants company. In a late-shift lab, the spectrograph screen dims to a gentle blue. A graduate student rubs tired eyes, notes the last trace in the logbook, and presses save. She was there months ago when the anomaly first carved its strange path, neither comet nor asteroid as they knew them. A messenger that refused easy labels. Since then she has learned to watch without deciding too quickly, to hold questions the way one holds a fragile cup. If the universe has a voice, she thinks, it speaks in patience. Across town, a boy has built a telescope tube from cardboard, tape, and hope. He points it at the place where the visitor once flashed brightest, where its trajectory crossed the dark like chalk on slate. He cannot see it now. It is too far, too faint, already outward bound. But he keeps the telescope steady because steadiness is part of the ritual, and the ritual matters. He whispers to the sky, not to call anything down, but to let the sky know he's listening. A nurse on a night shift sits at the break room table, sipping from a mug that reads, NASA Mom. The hospital sleeps in pulses, a monitor tone here, a soft footstep there. She turns on a bedside radio and hears a calm voice reading updates about the fading traveler. It is almost gone from their instruments, the voice says. It will slip past the cradle of silence that holds their son and wander on, perhaps toward another star, perhaps into a dark that has no name. She closes her eyes and lets the words float. Her day has been full of small rescues. She knows the weight of a hand, the meaning of a glance. The radio's quiet static feels like starlight made sound. Imagine looking up tonight. The air is cool. The sky is a careful map of things you will never touch and yet somehow belong to. Between one heartbeat and the next, you hear a faint cosmic whisper carried by starlight. It is not language as you know language. It is the suggestion of meaning, the hint of a door. You do not answer with words. You answer by how you hold the silence, by the way your breath slows, by the way your thoughts drift and settle like snow. The whisper is a reminder that you are part of a story written across light years. And tonight the story turns toward wonder. There were theories, of course. Scientists traced the orbit, compared it with comets, tested for outgassing, measured the light curve, and asked whether radiation pressure could account for the odd acceleration. The data did not shout. The data gestured. Was it a stone shaped by time, or a messenger shaped by intention? No single truth stepped forward, hand raised. People debated, not to win, but to see. The planet leaned closer to its own reflection. In living rooms and on rooftops, strangers became a kind of chorus. Someone posted a phone photo of the dawn, a pale stripe laying across an ordinary street. Under it, comments ran like a gentle river. I saw it too. I missed it, but I felt something. Did anyone else wake up at 4 a.m. with their heart beating fast? People place their feelings side by side, the way astronomers place images in sequence, looking for what changes and what remains. And whether the visitor was messenger or stone, the chorus learned a shared melody, a dream that needed many voices to sound like itself. A teacher brought a model of the solar system to her class. She held a pebble in one hand and a marble in the other. Imagine, she said, a traveler from a distant shore crossing the great dark. We do not know its purpose. It may have none. But if you hear a footstep outside your door, you notice. You wonder. She let the pebble roll across the floor and watched the students follow with their eyes, amazed that something so small could hold their attention so completely. Later, when the room was empty, she stood at the window and looked at the pale afternoon sky. The thought came like a warm, honest light. If destiny calls across light years, maybe the first reply is how we treat each other here. In the lab, the student watched the last data point appear. It drifted toward the edge of the plot and then beyond. She thought of all the messages that had arrived in her life without stamps or names. A friend's sudden silence, a stranger's kindness in a grocery line, the bruise-colored sky before a storm. She had always assumed science and wonder stood in different rooms. Tonight, the door between them was open and a soft breeze moved through. The boy with the cardboard telescope asked his father what Interstellar really meant. The father said, "Between stars," and traced a line across the ceiling, fingertip moving from one glow-in-the-dark sticker to another. "A long road," he added. "Longer than we can say." The boy nodded as if he understood. Later, when the lights were off and the house settled into its night sounds, he looked at the ceiling again. The glow had faded, but he remembered the pattern. He felt small and also important, the way a single quiet note can be small and still carry the whole song. On a bus, a tired couple leaned their heads together and listened to a podcast about the traveler. The host described its trajectory. The way it came from the direction of the solar apex. The way it swung past the sun and sped away, as if our star had only been a bend in the river. The couple did not know the math, but they understood the feeling. The host said, "We are a planet that wants company," and the words made them smile. They held hands, and at the next stop, they stood more slowly, as if stepping into a larger room. Astronomers once searched the sky for comets that would foretell chaos. Now they search for everything to learn, not to fear. Telescopes scan in radio and optical, in infrared that feels like warmth, in ultraviolet that burns with youth. Dishes catch whispers from pulsars, the regular drumming of distant hearts. Spacecraft skim the edges of the heliosphere, tasting the thin wind that marks the border. Their instruments are careful and cold, but the impulse behind them is human and warm. The need to know if we are alone, the need to be known. As the visitor faded, something else brightened. The thin connections between rooms. A message thread stretched from a late-shift lab to a child's bedroom to a nurse's radio. From a mountaintop observatory to a city alley where a delivery driver paused, looked up, and traced the dipper with a finger. People felt smaller, yes, because scale is honest, but they also felt more connected, as if the night itself were an ocean, and every gaze was a tiny boat with its lantern lit. Some nights bring cloud. Some bring a clear dome, a planet rising like a polished coin near the horizon, an exoplanet transit dimming a star's light by a fraction too small to see with eyes alone. Some nights give meteors, quick needles stitching invisible words in the dark. In all these nights, the steady fact remains. The universe is speaking. Not loudly, not with answers, but with presence. A nebula forms a veil of gas and light, and inside that veil, stars are born. Spectrographs tell of elements that also live in your blood. The carbon that writes this sentence, the iron that moves oxygen through your chest, the calcium that holds your bones once inside the fires of stars. So what did the traveler say? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. It might have been only stone, surface baked and scarred, tossed by tides of gravity. Or it might have been a fragment of a message, a shard from a civilization's long-ago craft, a sign that someone else once asked the same questions and threw their curiosity into the dark like a bright seed. Either way, the meaning for the planet is the same. Wake up and see each other. Imagine, again, that second-person hush. You, under the night, a small figure on a spinning world. You listen. You remember the stranger on the bus, the friend who called, the kind word that changed your day, the gentle boundary that saved you, the apology that stitched a tear. If they were signals from beyond, you would treasure them. You would mark their arrival time, note their amplitude, cross-check their sources. The planet does not need to wait for a clear transmission to begin responding. It can answer now with patience, with care, with the soft courage of attention. If destiny calls across light years, maybe the first reply is not a shout into the void, but a hand reached toward the nearest person, a voice lowered so it can be truly heard. A planet ready for company is a planet where the late shift lab shares its wonder with the cardboard telescope, and the bedside radio becomes a lighthouse on a quiet coast. It is a place where curiosity is not a luxury, but a daily bread, passed from person to person until the table feels full. In the years to come, people will build better telescopes. They will tune arrays to catch whispers they used to miss, will launch silent sails that ride sunlight like a slow breeze. We'll send small scouts to the deep where gravity knits its strongest nets. They will listen to the soft murmur of distant stars and the flicker of worlds crossing in front of suns not their own. Futures will rise like constellations, some bright, some uncertain, all part of a larger map. And when something else arrives, another anomaly, another messenger, another unexplained line across the night, the planet will breathe together before it names it. For now, The ancient traveler fades beyond the edge of attention. The sky goes on, steady and wild. In 100 rooms, lights dim. Someone sets down a mug. Someone peels tape from a cardboard tube. Someone logs the final entry of a long shift. Windows hold the cool of evening. Starlight moves through air and glass, as if carrying a letter not yet opened. The world grows quieter. The listening deepens. And in that quiet, there is a feeling, gentle and sure, that something has taken root, something that will bloom when the time is right. The glow thins into the horizon, but in its thinning, it leaves a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. A soft glow lifts from the edge of the sky. The world is quiet. The sea holds its breath. Far above, a slow visitor crosses the dawn, its tail a pale veil against the blue. People point and whisper, a comet. But the path is too steady, the shine too even, the curve too sure. What drifts there is not ice or rock. It is a sail and engineered sheet, the width of a city riding sunlight, the way a leaf rides a stream. It looks ancient, like a relic, but it moves with math. It passes and does not turn. It leaves behind only a memory of silver, a faint hum in the air, and a question that floats like mist. Who sent it, and why so gently? Astronomers had trained their telescopes on such visitors for years. They watched orbits and tracked trajectories. They cleaned the mirrors, cooled the sensors, kept the spectrographs honest. Past comets had shed dust and secrets. This one shed only light. Its spectrum told a story of thin alloys and a structure woven like silk. No alarms, no engines, only sunlight pushing on a crafted skin. The sail kept its pace and slid into a long arc away from the sun, toward the black. If it was a messenger, it spoke in a language of patience. Below, in low Earth orbit, cubesats drifted in formation like a small school of fish. They were the quiet workers of this era. Shoebox machines, whispering by radio, tilting tiny reaction wheels, holding to each other by software and timing. In small steps, they learned to fly as one. They formed lines and spirals, then broke and reformed with calm grace, like dancers who had rehearsed for years. Their cameras looked outward. Their spectrographs looked inward. They measured the sail's light, then measured the darkness around it, then measured the space between those two measurements, as if the gap itself could carry meaning. In the radio bands, a different experiment waited a relay that used pulsars instead of clocks. Pulsars are the old lighthouses of the galaxy. They spin, and each spin is a beat, and each beat is a promise. Engineers set up a system that listened to these beats and turned them into time with no human hands in the loop. A relay anchored to such timing could be a bridge. It could take a message here, place it in the rhythm of distant stars, and deliver it there with no drift. If others had built sails to cross sunlight, perhaps they had built messages to cross pulse by pulse. The chapter of Gentle Tomorrow is not loud. It does not flare. It moves like a tide after midnight. Every part is a step, and each step is cautious. On the ground, spectrographs become better at separating light from light. They tease the fingerprints of molecules out of thin clouds and distant comas. In space, orbiters drift near interstellar debris and greet it like an old friend at a train platform. They do not reach with claws. They glide beside, exchange a breath of gas, take a grain of dust, and let the traveler continue on its way. No capture, no panic, only a quiet handshake between wanderers. In one scene, a probe leaves the inner system. It is small. It is careful. It carries a simple instrument, a way to measure motion with extraordinary calm. The probe will not shout. It will test. It will pass by young worlds, the kind that holds civilizations just learning to draw straight lines with their measurements. The probe will turn a mirror, swing a pendulum, shine a laser across a known distance, and see how that world's watchers record the event. Do they measure with sticks of time or sticks of light? Do they trust clocks or stars? How do they define the speed of their present? The probe's data will not be a code. It will be a question. It will ask, how do you count? In the gentle tomorrow, questions are the safer gift. Answers can be heavy. Answers can make strangers move too fast. But questions invite rest. They invite a pause, a drift, a look up at the ceiling of the sky. The probe hopes that any watchers, if they exist, will see the pattern of its motion and discover themselves in the reflection of that pattern. They might reply by moving a mirror of their own. They might dim a beacon in a way that says, we count like this. Back home, people listen. Not with one dish, but with fields of quiet ears across mountaintops and plains. Signals slip through the air like silver threads. Some are weather. Some are satellites. Some are noise. The rest are the unknown thin, stubborn lines, the way a hair can lie across a page and go unseen until the light is right. Software pulls at those lines with patience. It checks against pulsar beats. It checks against the dance of Earth's own storms. It checks against everything we already know. And what remains will be the faint remainder, the part that resists easy naming. Astronomers name their nights. They remember discoveries the way sailors remember currents. There was the night the sail crossed the moon's face, a silk shadow. There was the night the pulsar relay slipped into lock, and the timing settled like a bird on a branch. There was the night the CubeSat spun a ring around a piece of interstellar grid and mapped its surface with sunlight alone. These were not high drama moments. They were gentle winds, like a door that is stuck for years finally opening with a soft click. In classrooms, the story of comets changes shape. Children still draw tails in frost, but they also draw lines and weaves like fabric. They learn that a comet can be a messenger, and a messenger can be a machine, and a machine can be kind. The drawings have silver threads and drifting shadows and long, patient paths. The words they use are not sharp. They are round and close to sleep. They say orbit, not chase. They say greet, not capture. They say listen, not interrogate. The tone keeps the mind near the pillow, even while the heart looks far. The sail moves on. It does. Not return. It may have never meant to. It might have been a test. It might have been a mirror to see if we would see it. Over months, its trail thins, and the memory of its brightness turns into a story told at quiet tables. The orbiters at the edge of the system trade notes. They compare dust from old comets to dust from foreign stones. They find small differences. The differences are interesting, but not frightening. They feel like accents in a language we almost share. At the same time, our tools grow careful and simple. Spectrographs learn to sit still under wind. Telescopes learn to speak to each other across desert nights and frozen mornings. They pass starlight like cups of water. They look at exoplanets and see hints of hazes, pale as breath on glass. The data is patient. It does not promise life or intelligence. It promises texture, a clue in the glow. The team who studies that texture learns to work with soft hands. They let the picture arrive over weeks. They do not grab at the first shape that appears. At last, the pulsar relay proves itself. A signal is sent between two orbiters without a ground clock. The timing holds. The packet arrives. The engineers share a small, tired cheer and go home. This relay is a step toward messages that live outside any single world. If a harbinger comes again, another sail, another faint light, another ancient traveler, the relay will let us place our reply inside a rhythm older than our species. In that rhythm, our voice might be hard to hear, but it will be steady. It will be where a careful listener expects it to be, pulse after pulse. There is also a philosophy growing here, as gentle as dew. It says, the first duty of contact is to do no harm to the dream. The dream is the fragile hope that the night is not empty. The dream is the quiet idea that time can carry messages without making noise. It is old. It is tender. This philosophy asks us to fold our technology into soft shapes. It asks for sails instead of rockets, for listening fields instead of single giant ears, for orbiters that greet, not grab. It trusts that patience is a kind of intelligence. We picture a future sky with small signs moving in it, a slow haze of beacons at the edges of planetary space. CubeSats flying in gentle arcs like swallows at dusk. Spectrographs breathing out tiny clicks as they separate light. No banner unfurls. No siren wails. The universe does not leap. It drifts. It hums. It opens like a flower in shadow, where the perfume is there before the bloom is seen. When the next visitor comes, maybe it will be brighter. Maybe it will be softer. Perhaps we will simply be better at knowing it for what it is. You might wonder, lying under your own hush of room and ceiling, if we will recognize a code sooner next time. We probably will. Our tools are learning to hear through noise, to hear beneath noise. We are learning the rhythm of our machines so we can hear what is not ours. We are learning the rhythm of the galaxy so we can place our reply in its heartbeat. We are practicing the art of not rushing. We are practicing the art of friendly orbits, of slow approach, of greeting interstellar debris with a hello instead of a net. And yet, even with all these steps, a question hangs in the air like a thin thread of light. What if a message arrives that we cannot read? What if it uses a measurement we have not met yet? What if its code lives not in symbols but in motion, in the drift of a sail or the shimmer of a comet tail that is not a comet? The gentle tomorrow does not fear this. It prepares. It sets out test probes that ask small questions about how others count time, how they measure speed, how they trust light. It builds relays that keep time with dead stars. It trains spectrographs to hear the quietest colors. The chapter closes with a view from far above. Earth is a faint blue sigh. The sail, already distant, is a sliver of moonlight on a river none of us have seen. The pulsars spin, faithful as ever. The CubeSats hold their formation and breathe their tiny breaths of data. The orbiters at the border keep watch and do not sleep, but their watch is gentle. In the soft dark between beats, you can imagine the future easing toward us, not with horns, but with a hand held out. The glow fades toward the horizon, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. And in that lingering, the silence deepened. Yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. A room goes quiet. A candle burns, and the dark around it seems to glow. A violinist lifts the bow, and for a breath, there is no note, only the promise of one. Out in space, a similar pause stretches between stars. It is not empty. It is a medium. It carries meaning the way the sea carries a boat. In the hush, your pulse slows. In the hush, the eye adjusts. In the hush, the universe does something simple and profound. It lets the message arrive without shouting. Tonight, the documentary voice leans warm and steady. Science tests. Story comforts. We look at what is not there, and we learn from it. Think of a heartbeat on a hospital monitor. The line spikes, rests, spikes again. Those resting flats are not nothing. They show rhythm. They show life between the peaks. Space works this way too. A telescope stares into a patch of nothing. Then time reveals a drifting shadow, an exoplanet crossing its star. The spectrograph shows dips where certain colors should be. Those dips whisper, hydrogen here, sodium there, a thin haze of water in the sky of a world no one has touched. Silence speaks by subtraction. A pause is a contour. A gap is a fingerprint. The shape of absence becomes a map. There's the silence of distance. An orbit defines it. A comet loops back, then leaves for years. When it is gone, astronomers do not call it lost. They track the trajectory, the arc set by gravity and time. The comet's coma fades, the tail thins, but the path remains written in numbers. Between visits, a kind of quiet instruction rests on the page. Patience. The dark around a candle is useful because it lets you see the flame. The space between cycles is useful because it lets you see the pattern. Even the black of a nebula is not pure black. It is dust and cold gas, a cradle that hides stars before they burn. There is the silence of listening. Radio dishes wait under a sky of soft glow. The night air cools. The metal breathes. Distant starlight crosses the dish, most of it background. Most of it the steady wash of the cosmos. The signal is not always a loud beacon. Often it is a leaning curve in the static, a hint that something turned, pulsed, or flared. The mystery is not the noise. The mystery is the organized gap within the noise. An anomaly appears and fades. A cosmic whisper passes. Scientists test it, then test it again. They remove the known, the earth-made, the nearby. What remains is thin, fragile, maybe real. They do not rush. They let silence do its work. There is the silence of memory. Oumuamua, an ancient traveler, arrived, turned, and left. It came from outside the family of our sun. Its path not closed like a planet's, but open, hyperbolic, set for the deep. In 2017, telescopes caught a brief chapter of its flight. Seen, measured, puzzled over. Later, the debates grew. Was it a shard of rock? A shard of ice? Something else, shaped by physics and light? The answers were careful, often incomplete. And still, the object taught. It taught patience. It taught that a messenger can be a harbinger without being a warning. A soft omen, not doom. It taught that the turn of an object, the way it brightened and dimmed, could be a kind of sentence written across the dark. There's the silence of story. The narrator speaks, then stops. In that pause, the images take over. A comet peeling sunlight into a tail. A spectrograph holding thin lines like notes on a staff. A telescope dome opening its eyelid to the night. You fill the gap with wonder. A child's question lands in the quiet. Why does the sky seem louder when I close my eyes? Because hearing reaches farther when sight lets go. Because the mind, free of the bright, can sense the faint. This is how sleep meets science. The gentle veil of rest lets the hidden signal rise. You drift and the data sing at a lower volume, which is to say a truer one. There is the silence of method. Astronomers train themselves to read what is missing. The spectrograph dips show which elements drank the starlight. The steady timing of a pulsar's heartbeat shows where gravity bends space like a lens. The darkness between stars outlines the filaments of our galaxy. Like the negative space of a painting gives shape to the figure. Even orbits speak in pauses. Perihelion, aphelion, the long, slow swing where a comet lingers. Then the fast dive when it rushes sunward. Measure the rest, and the motion becomes clear. Map the quiet, and the path appears. There is the silence of feeling. Awe does not shout. Hope does not need a trumpet. In the cradle of silence, you can hold fragile ideas without breaking them. You can feel the weight of time and not be afraid. You can hear a question that is not loud but is alive. Tonight, the question floats like a small lantern over water. If the universe sent a message in a turn, what does it ask of us? Not panic, not haste. Maybe this: be patient, be curious, be kind. The cosmos has waited billions of years to cool, to cluster, to light. It does not mind if you take a breath before answering. There is the silence of scale. Space between stars is not empty. It is thin, yes, but not bare. Atoms drift. Dust circles. Magnetic fields curl like sleeping cats. A spacecraft coasts through a gentle ocean of particles, every second a quiet tap on its hull. That hush works as insulation. It keeps the cry of one star from drowning another. It lets a small world form in peace, ring by ring, grain by grain. In the quiet, Saturn gathered a crown. In the quiet, ice worlds kept their secrets. In the quiet, a faint comet from the edges set its course for sunlight it would only taste once. There is the silence of the present. You lie back. The room dims. A fan traces a slow orbit of air. Outside, the city lowers its voice. Inside, the film slows its cut. The narrator counts breaths without counting. 1. Space opens. 2. Starlight travels. 3. A body travels. 3. A body trouting. Telescope waits. 4. The soft glow fades to a gentle veil. On the screen, darkness is not a backdrop, but a character with lines. It holds the candle of a star in place. It holds your gaze steady. The science keeps its promise. Facts do not fight sleep. They guide it, like runway lights fading toward the horizon. There is the silence of tomorrow. The sky will speak again, not with a single headline, but with a pattern. Another exoplanet will dim its sun by a fraction. Another spectrograph will show a missing color that means a new chemistry. Another small object will pass unexpected and leave a debate that refuses to close. We will test. We will argue. We will refine. We will let unanswered things stay unanswered long enough to ripen. And in that time, the quiet will keep us gentle. A discovery that arrives too loud can break the very wonder it brings. A discovery that arrives in a whisper invites us to lean closer. And there is the silence of endings that are not endings. The camera finds the candle again. Its little flame stands unchanged, a tiny sun with its own gravity of attention. Around it, the dark has drawn back, not as an enemy, but as a canvas. The narrator's voice lowers to a thread. Oumuamua is a memory now, but a good one. It turned, and so did we. It taught us to wait. It taught us to listen to what space does not say, and find meaning in the pause. If the universe is speaking, maybe it asks only that we soften our noise and be present. As you drift towards sleep, let that be enough. The stars are patient. The instruments are ready. The night is kind. The candle breathes. The room holds still. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood.